Chapter 1379. But the difference was, in other people's hearts, they all held 120% respect for the statue of the late emperor. Because without the late emperor, there would be no current Great Qin Empire. Without the Great Qin Empire, there would be no them. So, people were not only grateful to the late emperor, but also grateful. But the imperial preceptor and the people of the Xueqi family were full of ridicule. So what if the late emperor was strong? Wasn't the Great Qin Empire now in the hands of their Xueqi family? Even in the near future, the Great Qin would change its surname to Xueqi. In fact, they were also very grateful to the late emperor. Because, if the late emperor hadn't overthrown the Tianyang Empire and established the Great Qin Empire, their Xueqi family wouldn't be where they were today. Of course. Their gratitude was tinged with sarcasm. A moment later, the ceremony of burning incense and worshipping the ancestors was finally completed. The empress pulled the little prince and walked to the side of the imperial preceptor. The officials and the people also got up one after another. The imperial preceptor looked at the head eunuch and said, "Read the imperial edict." The head eunuch nodded and took out the imperial edict from his chenkuan bag. This imperial edict was naturally prepared by the imperial preceptor and Emperor Hong in advance, and it was even stamped with the imperial jade seal. Seeing the head eunuch take out the imperial edict, the people present knelt on the ground again. This time, the empress and the little prince also knelt down. "His Majesty has decreed." The head eunuch opened the imperial edict and solemnly read it out. The content was similar to the handwritten edict in Qin Feiyang's hands. The only difference was that the handwritten edict wanted Qin Feiyang to replace the imperial preceptor and assist the little prince. And in the imperial edict, the imperial preceptor still assisted the little prince in handling the state affairs. After reading it out, the head eunuch looked at the little prince and the imperial preceptor and said, "Your Highness Imperial Preceptor, please accept the edict. This subject thanks your Majesty for your trust. This subject swears here that I will not let your Majesty down and assist His Highness well. For the Great Qin, for the people, I will do my best until I die." The imperial preceptor prostrated in front of the head eunuch and shouted righteously, his face full of gratitude. "This child thanks Father." At the empress's signal, the little prince also knelt on the ground and said respectfully. Then, he received the imperial edict from the head eunuch. The chief eunuch took out the imperial jade seal and looked at the little prince. He smiled and said, "Your Highness, please accept the imperial jade seal." At this moment, the state preceptor was extremely excited. As long as the little prince received the imperial jade seal, he would be the true emperor of the Great Qin Empire. No one could change that. The empress was equally excited. A mother's status depended on her son. Now that the little prince had become the emperor, her status in the imperial palace would naturally rise as well. Wait! But just as the little prince stood up and was about to take the imperial jade seal, a cold voice sounded. Everyone was slightly startled and quickly looked towards the source of the voice. They saw that the person who spoke was the Marquis of Shao. Both the imperial tutor and Empress Dowager's eyes flashed with hostility. The head eunuch asked, "Does Marquis Shao have any objections?" "This is your Majesty's imperial edict. Naturally, I do not dare to object. However, I do not understand why your Majesty did not attend such an important ceremony in person," Marquis Shao said. "So it's about that." The head eunuch came to a realization and said with a smile, "Your Majesty knew that someone would ask this, so he specially instructed me to tell everyone that he is currently in seclusion and does not want to be distracted." Marquis Shao asked, "Is seclusion more important than the coronation ceremony?" The head eunuch's gaze turned slightly cold as he said, "How can we, mere mortals, guess the thoughts of your Majesty? Therefore, Marquis Shao, please do not cause any more trouble in public and affect the progress of the ceremony." Marquis Shao's face darkened as he knelt on the ground and said, "I did not cause any trouble. I was just voicing out the doubts in my heart. If I have offended the dragon's might, I am willing to accept the punishment." The head eunuch smiled and said, "Marquis Shao is concerned about your Majesty. Your Majesty will definitely be deeply gratified when he learns of this. Please get up quickly." Marquis Shao frowned as he stood up and retreated to the side. He really wanted to see the emperor, but based on the current situation, it was impossible. The head eunuch also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He scanned the civil and military officials and the various marquis and asked, "Does anyone else have any objections?" "No." Marquis Xueqi was the first to shake his head. The others looked at each other and shook their heads as well. The head eunuch swept his gaze across the crowd and looked at the little prince. He smiled and said, "Your Highness, please accept the imperial jade seal." "All right." The little prince nodded and raised his hands. The head eunuch immediately placed the imperial jade seal in the little prince's hands. "This subject greets your majesty." Following closely. The head eunuch was the first to kneel in front of the little prince and respectfully called out, "Greetings, your majesty." The officials knelt down once again. The imperial advisor also bowed, but his hands were tightly clenched together. He was incomparably excited. "Your majesty, please ascend to the dragon throne." The head eunuch. The little prince raised his head and looked at the dragon throne before skipping towards it. The empress hurriedly grabbed the little prince and said in a low voice, "Tian'er, now that you are the emperor, you can't be like this anymore. You have to be mature and solemn." "How troublesome." The little prince muttered in dissatisfaction as he allowed the empress to pull him to the front of the dragon throne. He turned around and sat on it, unhappy. However, the two small hands did not stop. They touched here and there, unable to calm down. At the end of the day, he was still a child. It was difficult for him to be mature and steady like an adult. The imperial advisor frowned and looked at the empress. He sent a voice transmission. "This is improper. Hurry and carry him. Don't let him move." "All right." The empress nodded and carried the little prince. She sat on the dragon throne and held the little prince's hands with both hands. She whispered, "Tian'er, everyone watch. Listen to your mother and don't move." The little prince pouted and his little face was filled with displeasure. The imperial advisor glanced at the little prince and walked to the side of the dragon throne. He looked at the officials and a cold glint flashed in his old eyes. His Majesty is still young and there are many things that he doesn't know. Therefore, I hope that everyone can assist His Majesty with all their strength from now on to manage the court well and seek the well-being of the people. Yes, Imperial Advisor. The civil and military officials and marquises all cheered. Of course. If I find out that someone is playing tricks behind my back, I won't let them off easily. The Imperial Advisor said again. His Majesty's eyes trembled and he said no. The Imperial Advisor is so impressive. But then, a faint laugh suddenly sounded. The Imperial Advisor raised his eyebrows and scanned the void in the square. He really came. The group of officials and the surrounding crowd could not help but feel a chill in their hearts when they heard this voice. They hurriedly looked at the void. Because this voice was too familiar to everyone. It was Qin Feiyong. Under everyone's gaze, a young man in white appeared out of thin air under the statue of the deceased emperor. Who else could it be but Qin Feiyong? Everyone looked at Qin Feiyong's back and their pupils constricted. The Imperial Advisor's brows were also furrowed. But there was one person who was overjoyed when he saw Qin Feiyong appear. That was the little prince. Brother! The little prince cried out in surprise and broke free from the empress's arms and ran toward Qin Feiyong. Seeing this, the Imperial Advisor hurriedly grabbed the little prince and sent him back to the empress. He said with a voice transmission, "If you don't keep an eye on him and let him do whatever he wants, don't blame me for being rude." The empress's body trembled and she hurriedly hugged the little prince in her arms and whispered, "Tian'er, I beg you, please don't move around now, okay?" "I'm not. I just want to find my brother." The little prince looked innocent. "You may treat him as your brother, but he may not treat you as his brother. Don't be silly, okay? Maybe he's here to steal the martial monarch throne from you." The empress said anxiously. "Really? That's great. Anyway, I don't like being the emperor. It's definitely not fun, so I'll let my brother be the emperor." The little prince was overjoyed. Hearing this, the empress, the imperial advisor, the civil and military officials below, and the marquises all changed their expressions. The little prince did not care at all. He looked at the empress and said coquettishly, "Mother, can you let my brother be the emperor?" The imperial advisor suddenly turned his head and stared at the little prince like a poisonous snake, his eyes flashing with a terrifying light. The little prince was small and did not care at all. However, the empress's face turned pale instantly. She hurriedly covered the little prince's mouth and begged, "My little ancestor, can you stop talking?" The little prince looked wronged. Qin Feiyong did not seem to notice all of this. From the moment he appeared, He had been looking at the statue of his ancestor in silence. After an unknown period of time, Qin Feiyong suddenly knelt on the ground and bowed respectfully to the statue of his ancestor. Ancestor, don't worry. The empire of the great Qin will never be taken away because I'm here. After muttering in his heart, Qin Feiyong stood up and faced the imperial advisor and the others. The imperial advisor frowned. What are you doing here? Qin Feiyong glanced at the little prince and smiled at the imperial advisor. As his brother, how can I not congratulate him on his ascension? Congratulate? Everyone looked at each other. It was probably not that simple. However, no one dared to say it out loud. The imperial advisor said in a deep voice, "Since you're here to congratulate, why did you come so late?" Don't you know? The main character usually appears last. Qin Feiyong chuckled. The empress said angrily, "Qin Feiyong, don't be presumptuous. The main character today is my son." That's right. Today is the day of His Majesty Haotian's ascension, but you say that you are the main character. May I ask what your intentions are? Zhuge Wuhou also shouted. Qin Feiyong glanced at the empress and Zhuge Wuhou, and the corner of his mouth pursed into a playful smile. He said, "The two of you are indeed close friends. Even your words are so tacit." The word close friend was especially emphasized. When the two of them heard this, a trace of panic immediately appeared on their faces. Could it be that this little bastard already knew about their matter? The imperial advisor raised his eyebrows imperceptibly and looked at Qin Feiyong. Since you're here to congratulate, you should have prepared a gift, right? Of course. And there's more than one gift. Qin Feiyong nodded and said with a smile. The imperial advisor said, "Then please present it." Don't worry. Before presenting the gift, I still have something to deal with. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and slowly walked towards the little prince. Qin Feiyong, His Highness Haotian is now the Emperor of the Great Qin. You'd better not act recklessly. Chapter 1380. The Grand Tutor and the ministers present also became nervous. If it was someone else, they wouldn't care. But Qin Feiyong, who in the Great Qin Empire didn't know that he was a lawless lord. There was nothing he didn't dare to do. Qin Feiyong stopped in front of the chief eunuch. He looked at the chief eunuch and said faintly, "Step aside." The chief eunuch shook his head. Qin Feiyong grinned and asked, "Are you sure you don't want to move aside?" The chief eunuch immediately felt a sense of fear that couldn't be resolved. He quickly retreated to the side. This was completely instinctive. The Grand Tutor stared at Qin Feiyong. His palm was glowing with the power of a false god. Without a doubt, if Qin Feiyong dared to hurt the little prince, he would immediately attack. Qin Feiyong walked in front of the little prince and cupped his hands with a smile. "Your Majesty, please come down." The little prince pouted and said, "Brother, why are you also calling me Your Majesty? I don't want to be the Emperor." "Why don't you do it?" "Tian, the Empress scolded. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly. "If I wanted to be the Emperor, I would have sat on the dragon throne long ago. Why would I wait until now?" The little prince looked at the Empress proudly. "See, Mother, not only I don't want to be the Emperor, but even brother doesn't want to be." The Empress whispered, "He's lying to you. Don't listen to his nonsense." "Why would brother lie to me?" The little prince shook his head. The Empress stared at Qin Feiyong warily. "Tianfer, you're still young. Don't be fooled by his appearance. He's a demon who kills without blinking." Qin Feiyong joked. "I do kill without blinking, but I've never done anything shameless." The Empress' eyes trembled slightly. This wasn't the first time Qin Feiyong hinted. Qin Feiyong looked at the little prince and smiled. "Come down." "Okay." The little prince nodded and jumped down from Celestial Empress's body. Imperial Preceptor hurriedly stepped forward and shielded the little prince behind him. While the State Preceptor was protecting the little prince, Qin Feiyong's eyes were filled with killing intent. He took a step forward and raised his arm at lightning speed to grab Celestial Empress' neck. Celestial Empress' beautiful face instantly turned pale. The State Preceptor, the Chief Eunuch, and the other ministers were all stunned. They had always thought that Qin Feiyong's target was the little prince, but they never thought that it was actually the Imperial Empress. "Qin Feiyong, what are you doing?" "Stop!" Zhuge Wuhou regained his senses and immediately shouted. His eyes filled with killing intent. Your heart aches just because of this? Qin Feiyang picked up the empress, turned to look at Zhuge Wuhou and teased. Zhuge Wuhou panicked and pretended to be calm. I don't know what you are talking about? But let me tell you, Celestial Empress is the birth mother of His Majesty Hao Tian. If you dare to hurt her, the entire Great Qin Empire will not tolerate you. Qin Feiyang said, then tell me, when has the Great Qin Empire ever tolerated me? Zhuge Wuhou didn't know how to answer. You're not going to answer? Then let me tell you. From the moment I was chased out of the imperial capital, the Great Qin Empire no longer tolerated me, Qin Feiyang. Everyone wanted to kill me. Everyone wanted to beat me up. But so what? Aren't I still living well? Qin Feiyang stood proudly, his long hair and clothes fluttering in the wind. His gaze swept across the entire audience, as if a king had descended to the world, his entire body filled with a monstrous domineering aura. None of the civil and military officials below dared to look him in the eye, and all of them lowered their heads. Finally, Qin Feiyang's gaze once again landed on Zhuge Wuhou's body, and said, I'm not saying this to show off how powerful I am, but to tell you before you threaten me, it's best to use your brain and think carefully. His words were filled with mockery. Zhuge Wuhou's hands that were hidden in his sleeves couldn't help but clench tightly. At this time, the little prince ran out from behind the imperial tutor and looked at Qin Feiyang. Big brother, why did you hurt mother again? Did mother do something wrong? Your Majesty, be careful. The imperial tutor's expression changed, and he hurriedly protected the little prince behind him. Qin Feiyang glanced at the little prince, then looked at the imperial tutor and said, Is there a need to be so nervous? If I really wanted to harm him, do you think he would still have the chance to stand here? I'm afraid he would already be a corpse. The imperial tutor frowned and said in a deep voice, What exactly do you want? What do I want? Qin Feiyang muttered, a bright smile gradually appearing on his face, and said, Some people living in this world are just wasting food. As he said this, Qin Feiyang suddenly looked at the empress and said with a smile, For example, you. That smile was like the smile of a death god. The empress suddenly felt as if she had fallen into a bottomless abyss, and her entire body was ice cold. Crack! As soon as he finished speaking, under the shocked gazes of countless people, Qin Feiyang's 5 fingers tightened, and he actually crushed the empress's throat. Ah! Accompanied by a mournful scream, the empress died on the spot. This. He. Seeing this scene, the people present were all stupefied. He actually killed the empress in front of everyone? Heavens! Was this guy going to heaven? How dare he? The empress was the mother of a country. And now, she had another identity, the birth mother of the White Sky Emperor. In terms of status, she was even higher than the imperial tutor. Yet, Qin Feiyang had actually killed her in front of so many people, in front of His Majesty the White Sky Emperor? This person was too arrogant. This was a public provocation. The scene was as silent as ashes, and everyone's hearts were in turmoil. Qin Feiyang, you brute! After the imperial tutor came back to his senses, he immediately shouted. His old eyes filled with anger. As for the little prince, he was scared silly. Qin Feiyang glanced at the imperial tutor indifferently, waved his hand, and threw the empress away as if she was trash. No one knew if he did it on purpose or not, but with a bang, the empress fell right in front of Zhuge Wuhou. Zhuge Wuhou immediately quivered and came back to his senses. He lowered his head to look at the pale-faced empress, who died with her eyes wide open, and an unresolvable sorrow appeared on his face. However, under that grief, there was also endless killing intent. He instinctively reached out, wanting to touch the empress's face. You dare! But at this moment, an angry shout exploded in Zhuge Wuhou's mind like a clap of thunder. Zhuge Wuhou's body and mind trembled as he raised his head to look at the imperial tutor. The imperial tutor sent a sound transmission. Although she is the woman you love the most right now, you better put away your emotions. Yes. Zhuge Wuhou secretly replied. Looking at the empress's corpse, the sorrow on his face quickly disappeared and was replaced by anger. You're quite good at enduring. Qin Feiyang looked at Zhuge Wuhou in surprise, then looked at the little prince. Discovered. In the little prince's eyes, there was already a trace of hatred towards him. Suddenly, someone roared, This child killed the empress in front of everyone, causing both man and god to be indignant. If we don't kill him, where is the justice? Qin Feiyang raised his head to look. It turned out that Qianwu Marquis was fanning the flames. Right. He's too arrogant. If we don't do anything about it, I don't know what kind of heartless things he will do. Your Majesty Hao Tian, please issue the decree. Arrest Qin Feiyang, throw him into the divine prison, and choose a day to behead him. The civil and military officials all roared in anger. But the little prince turned a deaf ear to them, and only stared at Qin Feiyang silently. The head eunuch looked at Qin Feiyang in fear, ran to the imperial tutor's side, and said in a low voice, Lord Imperial Tutor, His Majesty Hao Tian has been frightened. I suggest that we send him back to the imperial palace immediately. The imperial tutor turned to look at the little prince and nodded. Send him back, comfort him well, and bring the empress's corpse back as well. Yes. The head eunuch nodded. But at this moment, Qin Feiyang looked at the head eunuch and the imperial tutor, and laughed. What's the rush? I still have a congratulatory gift that I haven't given yet. The imperial tutor looked at Qin Feiyang sinisterly, and said, Don't worry about him, bring His Majesty back. The head eunuch hurriedly opened a teleportation door. The imperial tutor is so domineering. Qin Feiyang clapped and laughed. But, before I give the congratulatory gift, no one is allowed to leave. Old Qin, come out. As Qin Feiyang's voice fell, Old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army rushed out of the crowd and landed beside Qin Feiyang like lightning. The imperial tutor's pupils suddenly shrank. Seeing that Old Qin had arrived, the head eunuch did not dare to move. Old Qin glanced at the imperial tutor and the others and said, Bastard, what are you trying to do? He and the commander of the Kirin army had arrived long ago, so they had seen everything that had happened before. They never thought that Qin Feiyang would actually kill the empress in front of everyone. You will understand in the future. Qin Feiyang secretly said, and then looked at the ministers and marquis below, and shouted, All of you shut up. Everyone immediately fell silent, their eyes filled with fear. So this kid had Old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army behind him. No wonder he dared to be so arrogant. Qin Feiyang nodded in satisfaction, then looked at the little prince and smiled. Your Majesty, please sit on the dragon throne. The imperial tutor angrily said, What are you trying to do? Following that, he sent another sound transmission. Don't forget that you promised to help me, to help the little prince ascend to the throne. Qin Feiyang secretly laughed and said, Isn't the little prince already ascended to the throne? The imperial tutor secretly said, Then why are you causing all this trouble now? Qin Feiyang said, Don't be anxious, you will know later. The imperial tutor's face was gloomy. He personally carried the little prince and walked to the dragon throne. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, Don't mess around, the dragon throne is not something you can touch. The imperial tutor was prepared to do what the empress did before, sit on the dragon throne and carry the little prince in his arms. But when he heard Qin Feiyang's words, his expression froze. Don't worry. I know what I am doing. The imperial tutor coldly snorted and placed the little prince on the dragon throne, then stood beside the little prince, looking at Qin Feiyang and the other two warily. And at this moment, the little prince was no longer as lively as before, sitting obediently on the dragon throne. But if one looked carefully, they would find that the hatred on his young face was getting stronger. Qin Feiyang naturally noticed, but he did not take it to heart. Before he decided to kill the empress, he had already expected that the little prince would hate him. But what did it matter? He just had to have a clear conscience. Chapter 1381. Why did he say that? Because the situation was different. Before, the little prince didn't ascend to the throne. He could pretend to be deaf and dumb. Because at that time, although the empress was the master of the harem, she didn't have the power of regent. So no matter what she did, she couldn't do anything. And now, the little prince became the emperor of Great Qin. As the mother of the little prince, the power in the empress' hands was naturally not what it used to be. Of course, if the empress and Zhuge Wuhou didn't have an affair, it didn't matter. But now the situation was that this woman was in cahoots with Zhuge Wuhou and the state preceptor to control the little prince. So, if this woman continued to live, then the little prince would be killed by her sooner or later. In other words, he killed the empress to protect the little prince. However, the little prince couldn't understand this now. Even if Qin Feiyang told him the truth, he couldn't understand at such a young age. However, Qin Feiyang didn't plan to tell the little prince. If he wanted to hate, then hate. Besides, Hatred could make a person grow quickly. Just like when he was young, he was as innocent as the little prince and thought that the world was full of good people. But the result? How many good people did he meet? So, only when he tasted pain and saw the cruelty of the world, his mind would mature. And this was what the little prince needed the most now. At this moment, the central square was so silent that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Everyone's eyes were on Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong's own ability and foundation couldn't be underestimated. Now with Elder Qin and the commander of the Kirin army, even in the face of the state preceptor, he already had the strength to be on par with him. In fact, everyone was very puzzled. When did Elder Qin and the commander of the Kirin army rely on Qin Feiyong? Weren't they afraid of the emperor's punishment? After all, Qin Feiyong was the emperor's sworn enemy. This emperor didn't mean the little prince, but Qin Feiyong's father. Qin Feiyong looked around the entire place. In the end, he whispered a few words into the ears of the Qilin army's commander. After the commander of the Qilin army heard this, he immediately looked at him in surprise. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "Do as I say." "All right." The commander of the Kirin army nodded. He immediately opened a portal and ran in without looking back. Seeing this, the imperial tutor's frown deepened. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "Imperial preceptor, please don't be impatient. When the commander invites that old man here, I will present a congratulatory gift. This advisor would like to see what kind of tricks you have up your sleeve." The imperial preceptor snorted. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and turned his head to look at the statue of his ancestor. For a moment, he fell silent. Old man Qin glanced at the imperial advisor and frowned. He sent a voice transmission to the imperial advisor. "Brat, can you tell me what your plan is?" "It's a secret for now. However, you must be prepared to fight at any time." Qin Feiyong thought. Fight? Old man Qin was bewildered. Fight with who? Imperial advisor. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with killing intent as he sent a voice transmission. If this opportunity succeeds, the imperial advisor will definitely die. But the premise is, can you keep him here? Old man Qin's heart trembled. Who would have thought that Qin Feiyong was actually playing a big game of chess? Time passed breath by breath. Swish. Suddenly, 3 figures descended above the square. One of them was the commander of the Kirin army. The other 2 were Emperor Hong and Qin Jun. Emperor Hong. Seeing that the commander of the Kirin army had invited Emperor Hong, the imperial advisor, Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Nanhua, and the others all had a change of expression. At the same time, old man Qin's eyes were also filled with shock. However, the others looked at Emperor Hong and Qin Jun with suspicion on their faces. Who were these 2 people? Why had they never seen them before? Greetings, Emperor Hong. The next moment, a scene that shocked everyone appeared. Old man Qin and the imperial tutor both bent their waists at the same time and bowed to the old man. What? Even the imperial advisor and old man Qin are so respectful. Everyone's faces were filled with disbelief. He is Emperor Hong? How is this possible? Wasn't there a rumor that Emperor Hong had already passed away? Is this a dream? However, the various martial marquis present, as well as some old officials, were overwhelmed with shock at this moment. Because they still remembered this name. Look at Emperor Hong again. He stood high in the sky, looking down at Qin Feiyong with a trace of displeasure on his old face. Qin Jun's eyes flashed with a cold light. Qin Feiyong met Emperor Hong's gaze and said with cupped hands, "This commoner Qin Feiyong greets Emperor Hong." As for Qin Jun, he directly ignored him. This kind of small character couldn't enter his eyes at all. Emperor Hong asked, "Why did you specifically ask the commander of the Kirin army to invite this old man here? Why are all of you so impatient?" Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. Looking at the crowd around him, he said loudly, "Do you know who this old man is?" Everyone looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyong chuckled and said, "He is the son of the previous emperor, the second emperor of the Great Qin, and also my, Qin Feiyong's great-grandfather." His voice was like a bell, echoing in the sky above the first city district, not dissipating for a long time. What? The first city district was immediately in an uproar. Everyone's face was filled with shock. Seeing that Qin Feiyong had announced his identity, the displeasure on Emperor Hong's face became even stronger. He looked down at Qin Feiyong and said, What exactly do you want to do? You'll know soon. Qin Feiyong chuckled, swept his gaze across the audience, and said loudly, Now, I will present my first congratulatory gift. Finished. With a wave of his hand, a jade box appeared, floating in the air, emitting a hazy luster. In an instant, everyone's gaze fell on the jade box. The imperial tutor glanced at the jade box and nodded to the eunuch. The eunuch swallowed his saliva, stepped forward, grabbed the jade box, and carefully opened the lid. When he saw what was inside the jade box, his body stiffened, and his face was filled with disbelief. What made the steward so surprised? Seeing this, everyone became more and more curious. What is it? The imperial tutor raised his eyebrows and asked. Yes, yes, yes. The eunuch stammered and couldn't say anything for a long time. What the hell is it? Say it. The imperial tutor shouted. The eunuch said, The imperial jade seal. What? The imperial tutor's expression changed. He hurriedly walked to the front of the jade box and looked down. He saw an imperial jade seal lying quietly. How could this be? The imperial tutor muttered to himself. Emperor Hong, Qin Jun, the commander of the Kirin army, and old Qin also landed in front of the jade box. Looking at the imperial jade seal inside, their faces were filled with bewilderment. Isn't the imperial jade seal in the hands of the White Sky Emperor? Why does Qin Feiyong still have an imperial jade seal on him? People began to discuss. This sudden turn of events caught everyone off guard. Swish! After old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army came back to their senses, they immediately turned to look at Qin Feiyong, their eyes aggressive. Where did this imperial jade seal come from? Did you go to His Majesty? Old Qin secretly said. His tone was rather gloomy. Yes. Qin Feiyong didn't deny it. Why? His Majesty has already retired. Why won't he let him go? How did you find His Majesty? Old Qin said angrily. Since he has already retired, why is he still occupying the imperial jade seal? Occupying the latrine without shitting? What's more, if you want to deal with the imperial tutor, you must have the real imperial jade seal. As for how to find him, it's very simple. I followed the commander of the Kirin army. Qin Feiyong secretly said. You? Old Qin was furious. Seeing this, the commander of the Kirin army quickly said, Old Qin, it's more important to deal with the current situation. Don't be angry. Old Qin took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He grabbed the imperial jade seal and looked at it carefully. Suddenly, Qin Jun raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyong. With a stern voice he shouted, How dare you? You actually dared to forge the imperial jade seal. Hearing this, Qin Feiyong's expression didn't change. He was calm and collected. On the other hand, the imperial tutor panicked. Because he knew very well. He was the one who forged the imperial jade seal. As for the imperial ruler's seal that Qin Feiyong took out, it was very possible that it was the real imperial ruler's seal. But he couldn't figure out why the imperial jade seal was in Qin Feiyong's hands. Seeing that Qin Feiyong was silent, Qin Jun thought that Qin Feiyong had tacitly agreed. Killing intent flashed in his eyes as he looked at Emperor Hong and said, Lord, Qin Feiyong forged the imperial jade seal and offended the emperor's prestige. This is a heinous crime. Lord, you must punish him severely. Emperor Hong's eyes flashed. Qin Feiyong looked at Qin Jun and said playfully, You want to kill me that much? Qin Jun sneered, It's not that I want to kill you. It's that you're courting death. I'm courting death? Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and asked, How do you know? Qin Jun snorted coldly. The imperial jade seal in the imperial tutor's hands has been personally verified by Emperor Hong. Heard it. Everyone looked at Qin Feiyong. If it was as Qin Jun said, the imperial jade seal in the imperial tutor's hands was real, then the imperial jade seal that Qin Feiyong took out was definitely a fake. Even daring to forge the imperial jade seal, did this guy really not want to live anymore? He even invited Emperor Hong over. Wasn't this courting death? The corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth lifted slightly. He looked at Qin Jun and said with a smile, What if this imperial jade seal of mine is real? If it's real, this old man will kneel down and apologize to you in public. Qin Jun opened his mouth without hesitation. Because back then, Emperor Hong had indeed personally verified it. He also witnessed it with his own eyes. Therefore, he firmly believed that the imperial jade seal that Qin Feiyong took out was fake. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, "You're an old senior. You can't go back on your words." "Nonsense. What kind of identity does this old man have? Naturally, I'll keep my word." "But what if this imperial jade seal of yours is fake?" Qin Jun sneered. "Isn't he just a page boy? What kind of identity is he?" "What a joke." Qin Feiyong secretly smiled disdainfully and said indifferently, "If it's fake, I, Qin, will commit suicide in public to apologize." "Haha." Qin Jun laughed loudly and sent a sound transmission to Qin Feiyong. "Little bastard, you're dead for sure today." "Let's wait and see." Qin Feiyong smiled coldly. Qin Jun looked at him sinisterly, then snatched the imperial jade seal from old Qin's hands and respectfully handed it to Emperor Hong, saying, "My lord, please verify it." Chapter 1382. At this moment, the imperial preceptor was unprecedentedly nervous. Because he was guilty. Zhuge Wuhou and the others were equally nervous. At this moment, the only people who could remain calm at the scene were probably old Qin, the commander of the Kirin army. Qin Jun, old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army both knew that this imperial jade seal was real. Qin Jun, on the other hand, believed that it was fake. Because they weren't worried at all. 2 imperial jade seals? What's going on? My lord, tell me which one is real. Which one is fake? Inside the space divine object, Mu Qing's face was full of suspicion. Lu Xingchen looked at Qin Feiyong and the imperial preceptor, and suddenly laughed. "Don't you understand Qin Feiyong's character? He never does things that he is not sure of." Mu Qing raised his eyebrows and said, "My lord means that Qin Feiyong's imperial jade seal is real?" "Yes." Lu Xingchen nodded. Mu Qing said in surprise, "So, he has seen the emperor? Is there a need to say? If he hasn't seen the emperor, would he really have the imperial jade seal? This bastard is really a cunning fox. I thought that he had been cultivating in seclusion in the castle these days, but in fact, he had been secretly plotting." Lu Xingchen rubbed his head, feeling a headache. Hearing this, Mu Qing was somewhat unconvinced. Lu Xingchen frowned again and said, "But I'm puzzled, where is this emperor hiding? And why does Qin Feiyong know so much about the imperial preceptor's every move?" If he didn't know about the imperial preceptor's every move, Qin Feiyong couldn't have done it so well. Could it be that there was Qin Feiyong's spy beside the imperial preceptor? On the square, Emperor Hong gradually frowned. "What's going on? It hasn't been verified for so long. Could it be that Qin Feiyong's imperial jade seal is real?" People muttered under their breath. Qin Jun could not help but feel uneasy as he asked cautiously, "Sir, is there a problem?" Emperor Hong said, "Give me the imperial jade seal in the little prince's hands." Qin Jun's eyelids twitched. He hurriedly turned around and walked in front of the little prince. Regardless of the little prince's current identity, he directly snatched the jade seal from the little prince's hands and handed it over to Emperor Hong. Emperor Hong grabbed the imperial jade seal in one hand and compared it over and over again. In the end, he was surprised to find that there was no difference between the 2 seals. What's going on? Of the 2 imperial jade seals, one of them must be fake. But which one was it? Qin Jun asked. "Sir, can't you verify it?" Emperor Hong furrowed his brows. Looking at everyone, he said, "These 2 are both real." "Impossible. Even if it's an exact replica, there must be traces left behind. For example, the era. The real heirloom imperial jade seal has a history of 10,000 years. There are many traces of weathering on it. As for the forged imperial jade seal, there is absolutely none." Qin Jun said. "If you don't believe me, take a look for yourself." Emperor Hong raised his eyebrows and threw the 2 imperial jade seals to Qin Jun. Qin Jun immediately caught it in his hand and compared it carefully. The result. He was shocked to discover that the traces of weathering on the 2 imperial jade seals were almost exactly the same. Of course, this was carefully handled by the imperial preceptor. But Qin Jun did not know. His face was filled with disbelief. How could this be? Seeing this, the imperial preceptor, Zhuge Wuhou, and the others could not help but secretly heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, they also saw a turning point. Because, as long as the Emperor Hong could not verify the authenticity, Then they would have a way to make everyone believe that their Imperial Jade Seal was the real deal. The Imperial Preceptor's eyes flashed as he looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "This Imperial Preceptor really has no choice but to admire your methods. The forged Imperial Jade Seal. Even Lord Emperor Hong is unable to distinguish it." Qin Feiyong looked at the Imperial Preceptor, the playfulness in his eyes growing stronger. Emperor Hong also looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "How did you forge it?" Qin Feiyong said, "Why do you think that my Imperial Jade Seal is forged?" Emperor Hong said indifferently, "All these years, you have stirred up trouble in the Imperial capital, doing evil things to the extreme, and the Imperial Preceptor's loyalty to the Great Qin is obvious to everyone. Between you and the Imperial Preceptor, of course I will choose to believe in the Imperial Preceptor." "I'm stirring up trouble? The Imperial Preceptor is loyal?" Qin Feiyong chuckled, an indescribable sadness in his heart. This was his great-grandfather, Qin Feiyong? What a joke! The Imperial Preceptor secretly laughed and looked at the Emperor Hong respectfully. "Lord Emperor Hong, there is no need to waste words with this kind of person. Please give the order to take him down as a warning." "That's right. If we let him continue to cause trouble, who knows what will happen to the Great Qin Empire?" Qin Jun followed. "Haha." Qin Feiyong raised his head and laughed loudly. His laughter was filled with ridicule that couldn't be dispersed. How did it become like this? Victory is clearly in our grasp, but why is the Imperial Preceptor's forged Imperial Jade Seal so lifelike? Old Qin muttered to himself, looking at Qin Feiyong and the Imperial Preceptor, his heart filled with anxiety. At this rate, not only would they be unable to topple the Imperial Preceptor, even Qin Feiyong would probably fall here. This was far too different from the outcome he imagined. Emperor Hong looked at Qin Feiyong and said coolly, "Right now, you are too impudent. There is indeed a need to give you a bit of suffering. Don't force me to give the order. Take the initiative to follow me to the divine prison." "Impudent." Qin Feiyong was slightly taken aback, then continued to laugh loudly. "Still laughing? Simply preposterous. Do you still have Lord Emperor Hong in your eyes?" Qin Jun was furious, taking a step forward, a slap towards Qin Feiyong's face. "Humph!" Old Qin snorted coldly, standing in front of Qin Feiyong. Terrifying divine might was like a torrent, pouncing towards Qin Jun. Now that things had come to this, he already had no way out. He had to protect Qin Feiyong's safety. Seeing old Qin make a move, not only did Qin Jun not have the slightest fear, he became even more arrogant, staring at old Qin gloomily, and shouted, "What do you want to do? Want to rebel? As long as this old man is here, no one can even think about harming Qin Feiyong." Old Qin enunciated each word, his tone firm. But this sentence was not said for Qin Jun to hear. Qin Jun did not have this qualification. He said it specifically for the Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong. A cold light flickered in the Imperial Preceptor's eyes, landing in front of Qin Jun with a step, confronting old Qin. Emperor Hong's expression was still calm, sizing up old Qin, not knowing what he was thinking. "Looks like it's time to make a move." Inside the spatial divine object. Looking at the stalemate outside, Lu Xingchen muttered, a wisp of killing intent appearing in his eyes. The atmosphere in the plaza became more and more solemn. Old Qin and the Imperial Preceptor were both ready to make a move. But suddenly, Qin Feiyong stopped laughing, looked at Emperor Hong and Qin Feiyong, and said, "The Great Qin Empire has idiots like you. I, Qin Feiyong, also feel despair." What? He actually called Emperor Hong an idiot. My God, he's really crazy. Everyone was dumbfounded. The Imperial Preceptor, old Qin, and the commander of the Kirin army were also dumbfounded on the spot. What was wrong with this guy? Deliberately provoking Emperor Hong? This kind of attitude could no longer be described as arrogant. It was too crazy. Awesome. Domineering. Inside the spatial divine object, Mu Qing and Lu Xingchen also had a look of shock. When they came back to their senses, they opened their mouths one after another. Although they did not have a good impression of Qin Feiyong's current performance was indeed admirable. Impudent, impudent, impudent. On the plaza, Qin Jun quivered and suddenly roared, his anger overflowing to the heavens. "Who do you think you are? You dare to yell in front of me? Believe it or not, I will cripple you right now." Qin Feiyong also roared, his tone carrying a bone-piercing chill. Qin Jun's face stiffened. Looking at Qin Feiyong's cold eyes, his heart could not help but feel a sense of fear. So powerful. Everyone's mind trembled once again. It seemed that Qin Feiyong was going to completely tear off all pretense of cordiality with Emperor Hong. If you have the ability, why don't you try crippling him? Suddenly, Emperor Hong opened his mouth. His eyes, which had always been calm, finally changed, carrying a trace of sharpness that made people tremble. However, Qin Feiyong was not afraid in the slightest. He met Emperor Hong's gaze and sneered, "My ancestor's wisdom has been completely defeated in your hands today. Are you worthy of my ancestor?" Emperor Hong's face darkened slightly. Qin Feiyong turned a blind eye to it, looked at Qin Jun and said, "I have changed my mind now. The bet between you and me, double." Afraid of you? Qin Jun looked at Qin Feiyong with contempt. If the Imperial Jade Seal I took out was fake, I would immediately kill myself in front of the ancestor's statue. But if it's true, I want your old life. Do you dare? Qin Feiyong shouted, revealing his sharpness. So confident? Everyone was bewildered. Qin Jun also hesitated, his face dark and uncertain. "Feiyong, don't be so impulsive," Old Man Qin said in a low voice. "Don't worry about it. I'm going to risk my life with him today." Qin Feiyong waved his hand, looked at Qin Jun and sneered. "What? You don't dare? You only have this much courage? Trying to scare me? All right, this old man will fulfill your wish. I'll bet with you." Qin Jun flew into a rage out of humiliation and roared. "Very good." Qin Feiyong nodded with a smile, looked at Emperor Hong again, and said, "And you, I originally wanted to leave you some face, but you really don't know what's good for you. Now, don't blame me for being impolite. Lord Emperor Hong, do you dare to bet with me?" Emperor Hong raised his eyebrows. Qin Feiyong said, "If the Imperial Jade Seal I took out is real, I don't want your old life, as long as you kneel in front of the ancestor statue and repent for 3 days. This is a bit of a gamble." People muttered. The Imperial Preceptor's eyes flashed, and he said in a low voice, "Lord Emperor Hong, he is purely desperate. You don't have to pay attention to it. Please give the order to kill him directly." He couldn't help but start to panic again. Because Qin Feiyong was too confident, too calm. That was why he suggested to kill Qin Feiyong immediately. Because as long as Qin Feiyong died, all of the truth would be covered up. The corners of Qin Feiyong's mouth curled up, and he said coolly, "Want to kill me, Qin Feiyong? I'm afraid that no one here has this ability." Towards Qin Feiyong's arrogance, people were already numb. Right now, everyone only wanted to know whether or not Emperor Hong dared to bet. And what was the final result? Emperor Hong pondered for a moment, and said expressionlessly, "This old man is not a child. It's impossible to agree to your boring bet. If the Imperial Jade Seal you took out is real, then hurry up and prove it to this old man." "That's not right, right? The statue is our great Qin's late emperor, and also your biological father. Repenting in front of him, you actually dare to say that it's boring? Lord Emperor Hong, this son of yours is really incompetent. I can't help but feel sorry for the ancestor." Chapter 1383. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. This was obviously forcing Emperor Hong to agree. Moreover, now, Emperor Hong had no choice but to agree. Because Qin Feiyong had spoken too harshly. If Emperor Hong still did not agree, it would be equivalent to admitting that he was not qualified to be his son. The most important thing was that in this way, he would fall to the point where his reputation would be swept away. As expected, Emperor Hong looked at Qin Feiyong for a moment, then nodded in agreement to this bet. "Heavens, I beg of you, please help me." Seeing Emperor Hong nod, the imperial advisor's heart sank as he silently prayed in his heart. But he forgot that before the ceremony began, he had provoked the heavens. Crack! Boom! It was unknown if the heavens harbored hatred in their hearts and wanted to take revenge on the imperial advisor. Suddenly, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky. Dark clouds rolled over from the distant horizon. The earth gradually sank into darkness. This gave the imperial advisor a fright. "It's going to rain." Everyone looked up at the sky. But they didn't think too much about it. He just felt that it wasn't appropriate for the heavens to rain now. But Emperor Hong, Elder Qin, the commander of the Kirin army, and the various martial marquis couldn't help but think of the legendary ominous omen. Everyone couldn't help but ponder in their hearts. Could it be that the ascension of the young prince today would affect the fate of the country? Although dark clouds covered the sky, the rain did not fall. Emperor Hong retracted his gaze and looked at Qin Feiyong, saying, "Don't waste time, hurry up and prove it." Qin Feiyong also retracted his gaze, turned to look at Elder Qin, and asked, "You are familiar with the Imperial Jade Seal, right?" Elder Qin didn't know why Qin Feiyong asked this question, but he still nodded. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "Then let me ask you, is there any part of the Imperial Jade Seal that is incomplete?" Elder Qin said without thinking, "The Imperial Jade Seal is the treasure of the country, how could it be incomplete?" Qin Feiyong said, "All right, now go and carefully observe the bottom of the 2 Imperial Jade Seals. I guarantee that it will bring you a surprise." Bottom. Everyone present was slightly stunned. The 2 Imperial Jade Seals were now in Qin Feiyong's hands. When he heard Qin Feiyong's words, he immediately flipped them over and examined them carefully. However, old Qin stepped forward and snatched the 2 Imperial Jade Seals from Qin Feiyong's hands. Then he retreated to Qin Feiyong's side and lowered his head to examine them. Qin Feiyong reminded him, "If you can't see it with your naked eyes, use your divine sense." "All right." Old man Qin nodded. "Bottom?" The Imperial Preceptor looked at the Imperial Jade Seal in surprise. What was going on? His heart felt an inexplicable sense of panic. Then look at old Qin. His gaze swept over them one by one, not missing a single spot. Suddenly, his body trembled as his gaze locked onto a certain spot at the bottom of the Imperial Tutor's Imperial Jade Seal. His old eyes were filled with bewilderment. From the looks of it, he seems to have discovered something? People murmured. Old man Qin's every move now affected the hearts of everyone present. Boom. A moment later, Elder Qin was even more surprised. Huanjun released his divine sense and scanned the bottom of the 2 Imperial Jade Seals. Ha. About 100 breaths later, old man Qin suddenly laughed out loud. "What did you find? So happy." Everyone was puzzled. Suddenly, old man Qin looked at the Imperial Preceptor and said sarcastically, "Old man, although you did it flawlessly when you forged this Imperial Jade Seal, you still missed out on something." The Imperial Preceptor's face darkened. "What did I miss?" The commander of the Kirin army stepped forward and asked. Old man Qin raised the Imperial Jade Seal in his hand and said loudly, "At the bottom of this Imperial Jade Seal, there is a broken gap." "Impossible!" The Imperial Preceptor immediately shouted. When he was forging, he was very careful. There was no missing part at all. Old man Qin sneered. "No matter how much this old man says, it's useless. Let's let Lord Emperor Hong personally verify it." After saying that, he handed the Imperial Jade Seal to the front of Emperor Hong. Emperor Hong glanced at the Imperial Preceptor, and also released his divine sense into the bottom of the Imperial Jade Seal. Soon, a trace of anger crawled up his face. Obviously, he had already noticed the broken gap. Old man Qin laughed again. "Lord Emperor Hong, take a look at the Imperial Jade Seal that Qin Feiyong took out." Emperor Hong controlled his divine sense and enveloped the Imperial Jade Seal. As a result, he did not find any traces of damage on it. "Lord, how is it?" Qin Jun asked nervously. "Sigh." Emperor Hong pondered for a long time, then suddenly let out a long sigh, and said, "The Imperial Jade Seal that Qin Feiyong took out is the real one." "What?" Qin Jun's body and mind trembled, his face was pale, and his entire body collapsed powerlessly. It was actually true. Didn't that mean that he had lost this bet? Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Nanhua, and the others' faces were also filled with despair. "Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I want to verify it myself." The Imperial Preceptor suddenly roared as if he had gone mad. He snatched the Imperial Jade Seal from Emperor Hong's hands and did not use his eyes to look at it. He directly used his divine sense to check it. Divine sense was all-pervasive. What the naked eye could not see, divine sense could see. It didn't take long for him to discover the gap. How could this be? I was clearly very careful, very careful. How could there be a gap? The Imperial Preceptor's eyes suddenly became sluggish as he muttered to himself. His old face was filled with disbelief. Although he was muttering to himself, there were many people around who heard it clearly. It's really a forgery. We were wrong to blame Qin Feiyang. A dignified imperial preceptor, knowingly breaking the law, simply deserves to die 10,000 times. The most despicable thing is that he even slandered Qin Feiyang, saying that the real imperial jade seal is fake. Deceiving the top and deceiving the bottom, trying to cover the sky with one hand, his heart is worthy of death. A group of ministers immediately roared, filled with righteous indignation. In an instant, the imperial preceptor became the target of public criticism. It's really a good move, Lu Xingchen muttered. After such a ruckus, not only did Qin Feiyang successfully wash his name, his position in the hearts of the world had also reached an unprecedented level. Now, as long as Qin Feiyang gave an order, people would probably follow his lead. On the other hand, the imperial preceptor. Because he thought that he was clever, he had now become a street rat that everyone wanted to beat and kill. Mu Qing frowned and said, "It seems that Qin Feiyang's purpose is to eliminate the imperial preceptor today and destroy the Zhuge family at the same time. That's why he asked me for help," Lu Xingchen said. Mu Qing asked, "Do you want to help?" "Of course. After all, the imperial preceptor is also a big threat to us." Lu Xingchen smiled coldly, murderous intent surging in his eyes. When Lu Xingchen and Qin Feiyang cooperated, they had already agreed that the first step of the plan was to eliminate the imperial preceptor. But in the past, Qin Feiyang was not strong enough, and there was no false god by his side, so it was difficult for Lu Xingchen to kill the imperial preceptor alone. But now it was different. Qin Feiyang exposed the imperial preceptor's forgery of the imperial jade seal in public, which had already caused the imperial preceptor to arouse public anger. Old Qin and Emperor Hong would not let him go easily. So, whether it was for Qin Feiyang or Lu Xingchen, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This old man thinks that he is very smart, but he doesn't know that he has been led by Qin Feiyang by the nose. Mu Qing looked at the imperial preceptor in the screen and smiled contemptuously, then looked at Qin Feiyang, frowned slightly, looked at Lu Xingchen, and said, "Although we can take down the imperial preceptor this time, Qin Feiyang's threat to us is undoubtedly getting bigger and bigger. My lord, you have to be careful." "Yes. The speed of this kid's growth has exceeded my expectations. After entering the miracle and achieving our goal, I will get rid of him as soon as possible, so as not to become my roadblock in the future," Lu Xingchen said. "My lord is wise." Mu Qing bowed and said, the killing intent in his eyes undisguised. Outside, civil and military officials, the various marquis, and the surrounding people all glared at the imperial preceptor. And the people of the Zhuge family were terrified to the extreme at this moment. The plan was exposed. For their Zhuge family, it was no different from a disaster. How could it become like this? The imperial preceptor lowered his head and kept muttering, finding it hard to accept this fact. Who did it? Someone must be playing tricks. All of a sudden, the imperial preceptor roared, his killing intent soaring to the heavens. "It's me," Qin Feiyang said. "You." The imperial preceptor immediately looked at Qin Feiyang, his eyes flashing with a cold light, and said, "The imperial jade seal has always been in my hands, how could you have the chance to tamper with it?" Qin Feiyang said, "Remember back then, you came to me for the purple gold dragon blood?" Purple gold dragon blood. The imperial preceptor suddenly trembled. Qin Feiyang said, "At that time, I took the imperial jade seal to the castle. You should also remember this, right? It was after entering the castle that I tampered with the imperial jade seal." The imperial preceptor's gaze trembled. It turned out that at that time, Qin Feiyang had already set a trap for him. "Little bastard, I'm going to kill you." The next moment, his entire body emitted a monstrous aura. Back then, he had used the 10,000 beasts diagram as the price to exchange for the purple gold dragon blood from Qin Feiyang. If the plan succeeded and he lost the 10,000 beasts diagram, he didn't care. But in the end, not only did he lose the 10,000 beasts diagram, he was also tricked by Qin Feiyang, causing him to lose everything. How could he not be angry? Immediately, with a monstrous killing intent, he took a step towards Qin Feiyang. "You dare!" Emperor Hong and Elder Qin shouted at the same time. "Now that things have come to this, what else is there that I don't dare to do? Qin Feiyang, you want to kill me, I won't let you have it easy." The imperial preceptor laughed sinisterly. "Stubborn. Elder Qin and Emperor Hong were furious to the extreme. With a wave of their hands, the rolling divine might roared out. The two joined forces and forcibly brought the imperial preceptor up into the sky. Because if they fought in the square, the imperial city would be turned into ashes in an instant. There's a good show to watch. The commander of the Kirin army walked in front of Qin Feiyong and joked. Qin Feiyong laughed. I have been waiting for this day for a long time. The commander of the Kirin army looked at Qin Feiyong in surprise, then shook his head and smiled. No matter what Qin Feiyong had done, Qin Feiyong's heart had always been concerned about the great Qin Empire. This point would never change. But then, in the heart of the commander of the Kirin army, he was full of worry again. Looking at Qin Feiyong's attitude, he also wanted to help the little prince ascend to the throne. This was obviously going against his majesty. After this matter, the grudge between the father and son would definitely get deeper and deeper. The most important thing was, now, the little prince's succession to the throne had become a foregone conclusion. What should his majesty do in the future? How could he face this matter? After all, the little prince was also his own flesh and blood. Chapter 1384. Above the sky. The dark clouds were even denser. The wind roared, and thunder and lightning roared. Old Qin and the imperial tutor's aura were like rainbows as they fought crazily. The two's speed was pushed to the limit. Other than the fake gods, no one could catch their traces. They could only hear the deafening collision sounds. And every time they collided, the void they were in would shatter. Even the sky was trembling. But Emperor Hong did not make a move. He joined forces with old Qin and forcefully brought the imperial tutor up to the sky. He retreated far away and looked at the two from afar. His face returned to its usual calmness. The Kirin army commander frowned and said, now that the evidence is conclusive, why didn't Emperor Hong join forces with old Qin and quickly kill the imperial tutor? He's a person with his eyes on top of his head and thinks he's infallible. How could he make a move so easily? Qin Feiyong snorted coldly. If he wanted Emperor Hong to make a move, unless old Qin was no match for him. Sigh. When the Kirin army commander heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. Such a good opportunity. Why didn't he grasp it well? At this time, Qin Jun, who was paralyzed on the ground, suddenly got up from the ground and looked at Qin Feiyong. There was a hint of pleading in his eyes. Qin Feiyong looked at Qin Jun and said, if you didn't get up, I would have almost forgotten about you. Qin Jun's gaze trembled as he sent a sound transmission. Feiyong, it was all a misunderstanding before. Misunderstanding? Qin Feiyong smiled and said, you instigated Emperor Hong to kill me in front of everyone. Is this a misunderstanding? And the killing intent in your eyes at that time, even a fool could see it. Is this also a misunderstanding? It's really a misunderstanding. I did that purely to motivate you. Qin Jun's face stiffened as he hurriedly explained. Motivate me? Qin Feiyong was amused and said, then according to what you said, you're still doing it for my own good? Shouldn't I thank you? There's no need to be grateful. After all, we're family. Qin Jun secretly laughed. Family? Qin Feiyong was stunned. Emperor Hong is your great-grandfather and my master. If we're not family, what are we? Qin Jun smiled. Qin Feiyong suddenly understood and said, now that you mention it, we are indeed a family. Yeah. Qin Jun nodded. Yes, your sister. Kneel down. Qin Feiyong bellowed, his face instantly turning gloomy. Did he take him for a fool? Do you think he'll believe you just because of a few words? What a joke. Qin Jun's face stiffened. He didn't expect Qin Feiyong to turn hostile so quickly. Furthermore, there was no sound transmission. Everyone heard Qin Feiyong shout. Immediately, everyone looked at Qin Jun in unison, their eyes full of sympathy. Of all the people he could provoke, he had to provoke Qin Feiyong. Wasn't he courting death? Moreover, no one present was a fool. Although they didn't hear the conversation between the two, from Qin Feiyong's shout and attitude, they couldn't tell that Qin Jun was definitely pretending to be pitiful, gaining sympathy, and begging for mercy from Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong looked at Qin Jun expressionlessly, and said, I told you to kneel down, didn't you hear me? Do you want me to force you to make a move? Qin Jun's face was gloomy. One had to know that he was someone by Emperor Hong's side. Even if the imperial tutor and elder Qin saw him, they would have to be polite. However, at this moment, Qin Feiyong actually told him to kneel in front of everyone? Wasn't this clearly embarrassing him? The commander of the Kirin army said playfully, "Lord Qin Jun, have you forgotten the bet from before?" Hearing this, Qin Jun was like a bolt from the blue, his body and mind trembling. That old face was once again filled with despair. His entire body couldn't help but go soft, and he powerlessly knelt in front of Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong sneered, "What I hate the most is a dog like you who uses its master's power to bully others. You don't have any ability, and you rely on others to support you every day." I was wrong. For the sake of Emperor Hong's face, spare me this time. After all, I am still someone by Emperor Hong's side. Qin Jun pleaded. You can be considered a human? At most, you are a dog that can bite. Qin Feiyong smiled disdainfully. Qin Jun nodded repeatedly, and said, Yes, 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 I am a dog. Just pity me and give me a chance, okay? If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will kill them. This is my principle. Especially those who want to kill me, I, Qin Feiyong, will definitely not let them go. Killing intent surged in Qin Feiyong's eyes. Little bastard, don't go too far. Do you think I'm really afraid of you? You're just a mere 4-star war king. If I want to kill you, it's as easy as flipping my hand. Qin Jun flew into a rage out of humiliation. He suddenly raised his arm and slapped towards Qin Feiyong. Impudent! The Kirin army commander's expression changed. He immediately raised his arm and punched towards Qin Jun, tisk. But at this time, a sinister laugh rang out. Following closely, a wave of thunder energy appeared out of thin air, like sharp blades, and entered Qin Jun's chi like lightning. Ah! Accompanied by a mournful scream, Qin Jun's chi was crippled on the spot, and blood flowed out from his lower abdomen. Bang! Then, Qin Jun fell powerlessly at Qin Feiyong's feet, hugging his lower abdomen, and wailing silently. The Kirin army commander was stunned. The others were also shocked. Who was so strong that they could instantly cripple a 9-star combat Emperor Realm super expert? Everyone looked over. They saw that Qin Feiyong had a Lei Bao. It's him. Seeing Lei Bao, the surrounding civil and military officials, including the Marshal Marquis, all took a few steps back, their faces full of fear. Lei Bao had long been notorious in the imperial capital. Even his reputation was not inferior to Qin Feiyong's. The cheetah scanned the crowd and grinned. I am so kind, what are you afraid of? Kind. To hell with it. Everyone rolled their eyes. He even dared to flirt with the emperor's concubines and princesses, and even dared to auction the empress's underwear at the treasure pavilion. Everyone knew that he was shameless, but could there be a limit? Lei Bao was not ashamed. Instead, he was proud. His expression was full of pride as he lowered his head to look at Qin Jun, who was lying on the ground, and said contemptuously, Seeing how arrogant you are, I thought you were strong. I didn't expect that you were just a piece of trash. Qin Jun looked at the man and beast with a sinister expression, and said resentfully, I curse you to die a horrible death. You even believe in curses? As expected of an idiot. Lei Bao's eyes were filled with disdain. Before he finished speaking, its body suddenly expanded to dozens of feet, and then it opened its mouth wide, revealing its dense fangs, and swallowed Qin Jun into its stomach in one gulp. Gulp. Seeing this scene, everyone present felt their hearts skip a beat as they swallowed their saliva. A 9-star War Emperor realm expert was actually swallowed alive by Lei Bao just like that. This guy was too savage. Above the sky, Emperor Hong also noticed this situation. He lowered his head to look at Lei Bao, and a cold light flashed across his eyes. Lei Bao was not afraid at all. He raised his head to meet Emperor Hong's gaze, full of provocation. Boom! Crack! The battle between Elder Qin and the Imperial Tutor had already reached its climax. The power of the false god, the divine art, and the divine might constantly collided with each other. Waves of world-destroying airwaves surged out in all directions like raging waves. The entire sky above the Imperial City had already shattered. Although the battle fluctuations did not affect the Imperial City below, everyone in the Imperial City could not help but feel a sense of fear that could not be dissipated. It felt like the end of the world was coming. Qin Feiyong raised his head to look at the two of them, and his brows gradually furrowed. Elder Qin and the Imperial Tutor's strength were basically on par. The final result was hard to predict. It could be the Imperial Tutor's death, or it could be Elder Qin's death. The commander of the Kirin army said in a low voice, "We can't drag this on any longer. We have to think of a way to get Emperor Hong to make a move." "Don't count on it." Qin Feiyong glanced at Emperor Hong and said indifferently. "Then what should we do? Even if Elder Qin can kill the Imperial Tutor in the end, Elder Qin will definitely lose half his life." The commander of the Kirin army was extremely anxious. Without Emperor Hong, the Imperial Tutor will still die today. Qin Feiyong coldly snorted and whispered, "Lu Xingchen, you've seen enough, right? It's time to make your move." Lu Xingchen? The commander of the Kirin army was stunned, and looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Qin Feiyong did not explain, and looked at the sky, his eyes flickering. At the same time, inside the spatial divine object, Lu Xingchen glanced at Qin Feiyong, and then controlled the spatial divine object, flying towards the sky. "Lord, you have to be careful," Mu Qing warned. "Don't worry, the Imperial Tutor and Elder Qin are fighting fiercely right now. They won't think that I will appear at all. Just one strike is enough to take his life." Lu Xingchen smiled confidently. Whoosh! While they were talking, the spatial divine object had already quietly swept to the center of the battlefield. Lu Xingchen looked at the Imperial Tutor in the screen, killing intent flashing in his eyes. "This Imperial Tutor's fate is really bad, to actually meet you and Qin Feiyong at the same time." Mu Qing shook his head and smiled. Lu Xingchen chuckled, took out an illusory form pill, threw it into his mouth, and in the blink of an eye, turned into a middle-aged man. Although the Imperial Tutor is already an arrow at the end of its flight, Lord should still be careful. "Don't get angry," Mu Qing said. "Even if I get angry, it doesn't matter. Because the miracle is about to open." Lu Xingchen smiled faintly, and in the next moment, disappeared in front of Mu Qing. "Humph! If Emperor Hong doesn't make a move with your strength alone, you can't kill me at all." Outside, the Imperial Tutor sneered secretly while fighting with Elder Qin. "Then let's wait and see." Elder Qin's eyes were sharp, like the edge of a blade, causing people to be intimidated. Bang bang bang. Both of them were really angry, sparing no expense and resorting to unscrupulous means. But just as the two of them were locked in battle, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared behind the Imperial Tutor. "Who is it?" Elder Qin was shocked. The people below also saw the middle-aged man for the first time, and their faces were full of surprise. Someone actually dared to interfere in the battle between the Imperial Tutor and Elder Qin? He couldn't be a fake god too. As for the Imperial Tutor, when he sensed the aura behind him, he was also shocked and took a step to the side without hesitation. "Old bastard, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time." The middle-aged man smiled coldly, and a wisp of divine sense emerged, exuding a monstrous divine might, and swept towards the back of the Imperial Tutor's head like lightning. That's right, he was Lu Xingchen. Is it an alliance? Then it seems that it's someone arranged by Qin Feiyong. A good opportunity. Chapter 1385. In front of him was Elder Qin, a terrifying false god, and behind him was Lu Xingchen, an existence that was not inferior to a false god. In addition, everything happened so suddenly that the Imperial advisor had no time to counterattack. No! When Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Nanhua, and the others saw this scene, they couldn't help but anxiously roar in their hearts. As for the Kirin army's commander, his face was filled with excitement. He was finally going to get rid of this ambitious person. And at this time, Emperor Hong, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines, also moved. The aura he emitted was even stronger than the Imperial advisor and Elder Qin. Without a doubt, Emperor Hong was the same as Mu Chongfeng. He was also a supreme existence at the peak of the false god realm. Facing Elder Qin, Lu Xingchen, and Emperor Hong, these three great false gods, if nothing unexpected happened, the Imperial advisor would undoubtedly die today. But just as the Imperial advisor was about to die, Emperor Hong suddenly slapped Elder Qin's back. Pfft. Elder Qin immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and flew out like a kite with a broken string. This unforeseen event not only caught Lu Xingchen and Qin Feiyong off guard, but everyone present was also stunned. Originally, everyone thought that Emperor Hong was going to kill the Imperial advisor, but they never thought that his target was actually Elder Qin. What's going on? Everyone's hearts were filled with doubts. The situation had changed too quickly, hadn't it? Just as Emperor Hong made his move on Elder Qin, the originally panicked Imperial Advisor's old face suddenly revealed a cold light, and he slapped his palm towards Lu Xingchen's divine sense. Boom! Lu Xingchen's divine sense was destroyed on the spot. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. And just like Elder Qin, he was sent flying, his face deathly pale. This strength? Lu Xingchen looked at the Imperial Advisor in shock. Why is it like this? Qin Feiyang muttered. Why would Emperor Hong help the Imperial Advisor to plot against Elder Qin? This result was completely out of his expectations. Above the sky, Emperor Hong looked at Lu Xingchen, a cold light surging in his eyes, and said, "This old man has been waiting for you for a long time." Finished speaking. Emperor Hong and the State Preceptor looked at each other and joined hands to attack Lu Xingchen. Waiting for me? Lu Xingchen was bewildered. Emperor Hong said, "I've long heard from Imperial Preceptor that Qin Feiyang has a false god hidden by his side, so this old man has always been very curious. Just who is this false god? Are you luring me out?" Lu Xingchen was both shocked and angry. That's right. However, although I've successfully lured you out, this old man is even more puzzled after seeing you in person. You are only a 5-star combat emperor. Why do you have a divine consciousness? Emperor Hong asked suspiciously. Although he was speaking, his speed was not slow at all. Before he finished speaking, Emperor Hong and the State Preceptor arrived in front of Lu Xingchen, grabbing at Lu Xingchen from both sides. Qin Feiyang, you bastard! How dare you betray me? When Lu Xingchen heard Emperor Hong's words, he immediately lowered his head and roared at Qin Feiyang. He thought that Qin Feiyang was also involved. Not daring to have the slightest doubt, he immediately prepared to enter the spatial divine object. Boom! However, at almost the same time, Emperor Hong and the State Preceptor released their might, imprisoning Lu Xingchen in the air. Seeing that Lu Xingchen was imprisoned, the two of them did not immediately kill him. What? But seeing the State Preceptor's might, Lu Xingchen's expression changed. Qin Feiyang's expression also changed abruptly. They all knew that Emperor Hong was a supreme existence at the peak of the false god realm. However, the State Preceptor's might was not the slightest bit inferior to Emperor Hong's. What was going on? The State Preceptor glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked at Lu Xingchen and sneered, "You guys look very surprised. You've been hiding your cultivation all this time?" Lu Xingchen said in a deep voice. "No, I didn't hide it. It's just that I was lucky. A few days ago, I just broke through to the peak of the false god realm," the State Preceptor said. What? Qin Feiyang's mind trembled. Why didn't Yan Wei tell him such an important thing? Did the State Preceptor not reveal it? Or had Yan Wei's identity been discovered, and the State Preceptor deliberately hid it from him? Your face should be fake. I'm very curious. Who are you? The State Preceptor smiled coldly, took out a facial restoration pill, and stuffed it into Lu Xingchen's mouth. Soon, Lu Xingchen recovered his true appearance. How could it be you? Looking at Lu Xingchen's face, the State Preceptor's face was full of disbelief. Below, those who knew Lu Xingchen were also surprised. Wasn't he a disciple of the temple? How could he be a false god? No, he wasn't a false god. He just had the divine sense of a war god. Old Qin had also stabilized his body, standing in the void in the distance, glanced at Lu Xingchen, then looked at Emperor Hong and said angrily, "Why? In this world, how can there be so many whys?" Emperor Hong snorted coldly, looked at Lu Xingchen and asked, "Who the hell are you? Why have I never seen you before?" "Who am I?" Lu Xingchen murmured. At the same time, Old Qin took a step forward and rushed towards Qin Feiyang. The situation suddenly became like this. This place was no longer a place to stay for a long time. He had to take Qin Feiyang away as soon as possible. Stop him. But suddenly, Emperor Hong shouted. Boom! 3 terrifying auras burst out from the ground. 2 of them came from the crowd outside the square. They were 2 old men, with white hair and vast divine power. 2 more false gods. People retreated in horror. What was going on today? Why did so many false gods pop out at once? The 2 old men looked at each other and rushed into the sky like lightning. They raised their big hands and slapped Old Man Qin's chest from the left and right. Old Man Qin was sent flying again. Old Man Qin spurted out blood. His entire chest caved in and his ribs were all shattered. Even his heart was broken. But a broken heart was nothing to a false god. Old Qin stabilized himself in the void, clutching his chest, looking gloomily at the two old men and said, "You guys actually came out of seclusion." The two old men were silent, their eyes flashing with a cold light. Wait, where is the other divine power? The people looked around in surprise. Suddenly, their gazes were locked on the head eunuch in the center of the square. That divine power came from the head eunuch. At this moment, Qin Feiyong and the commander of the Kirin army, as well as Lei Bao, were all imprisoned by the head eunuch. The eyes of the two men and one beast were also filled with shock. They all knew the strength of the head eunuch. It was impossible for him to be a false god. There must be something fishy going on. As if seeing through Qin Feiyong and Lei Bao's thoughts, the head eunuch smiled contemptuously, took out a facial restoration pill, and put it into his mouth. This head eunuch is a disguise. Qin Feiyong's heart trembled. Soon, the head eunuch turned into another face. It was an old man with white hair and a pale face. The old man in front of him, as well as the two people blocking old Qin Feiyong was no stranger to them. They were the three false gods that sealed themselves in the back mountain of the imperial palace. Why were all three of them here? He had clearly taken out the evidence of the imperial preceptor forging the imperial jade seal. So why did Emperor Hong attack old Qin? If Emperor Hong's goal was Lu Xingchen, then now that his goal had been achieved, why did he still attack him? At this moment, Qin Feiyong's mind was in a mess. All of this was far beyond his expectations. It seems that I have misunderstood Qin Feiyong. Seeing Qin Feiyong's situation, Lu Xingchen secretly muttered, but soon after, countless questions crawled up in his heart. What the hell is going on? The imperial preceptor looked at Lu Xingchen, Qin Feiyong, old Qin, and the commander of the Kirin army, and sneered, "Today, none of you can escape." After saying that, he looked at Lu Xingchen and shouted, "Quickly answer Emperor Hong's words. Who are you?" "Me." The corner of Lu Xingchen's mouth lifted and said with a smile, "I am the person you don't want to see the most." Scaring imperial preceptor? The imperial preceptor said, "Look at me. Do I look like I'm scaring you?" "But now I don't want to tell you." Lu Xingchen said, "I'm afraid that's not up to you." The imperial preceptor sneered. "You don't really think that with this level of pressure, you can control me? Let me tell you, you're too naive." Lu Xingchen raised his head and roared. More than a dozen strands of divine sense flew out from the top of his head, directly shattering the majesty of the imperial preceptor and Emperor Hong. Such a strong divine sense. Their expressions changed. "I, Lu Xingchen, will remember today's debt. In the future, I will definitely repay it double. Qin Feiyong, you're on your own." Lu Xingchen smiled coldly and instantly disappeared without a trace. Facing two peak false gods, he really didn't dare to stay any longer, nor did he have the strength to help Qin Feiyong. Emperor Hong and Emperor Hong were furious. Their divine sense surged out, covering the sky and earth as it surged in all directions. In just an instant, they captured Lu Xingchen's spatial divine object. But just as they were about to intercept, 10 figures appeared in the sky above the imperial city without any warning. They were all wearing masks, so their faces couldn't be seen clearly. However, the aura emitted by each of them was incomparably terrifying. Who are they? Everyone looked at the 10 people in surprise. Emperor Hong, the imperial preceptor, and the 3 old men were also extremely surprised. Because with their eyesight, they could tell at a glance that these 10 people were all false gods. 10 people stood side by side in the void, as if 10 gods had descended, coldly scanning everyone. Anyone who had been looked at by them couldn't help but feel a deep fear in their hearts. "Greetings, young master." Suddenly, the 10 of them uniformly landed in front of Qin Feiyong and bowed. What? They are all Qin Feiyong's subordinates. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded, including Elder Qin, the commander of the Kirin army, Lei Bao. The imperial preceptor, Emperor Hong, and the 3 old men were also in disbelief. Qin Feiyong actually had 10 false gods under his command? What kind of joke was this? He must be dreaming. Lu Xingchen, who was about to escape, also had a face of astonishment. Mu Qing, who was next to him, even had his eyes popping out. Not to mention them, Qin Feiyong himself was also dumbfounded. Suddenly, 10 false gods popped out, and said that they were his subordinates? Was it really not the heavens joking with him? "Young master, we came late to save you. Please forgive us." One of them spoke. However, as he spoke, he gave Qin Feiyong a meaningful glance without leaving any trace. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. Seeing that Qin Feiyong didn't understand, the man sent a sound transmission. "This place is not suitable to stay for long, leave immediately." Finished. With a wave of his hand, the pressure that imprisoned Qin Feiyong and the commander of the Kirin army instantly disappeared. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed, and without hesitation, he reached out his big hand, grabbed the commander of the Kirin army and lay bow, and entered the castle. After entering the castle, he didn't stay for a moment and immediately drove the castle away. Seeing Qin Feiyong slip away, Lu Xingchen also quickly slipped away. "Damn it! Who are you? Why are you interfering in my great Qin's affairs?" The imperial preceptor roared. Emperor Hong's face was also extremely ugly. "We don't care about your great Qin's affairs at all. We only care about the safety of the young master." Chapter 1386. "Young lord," the imperial preceptor muttered to himself and roared. "He's just a brat. What ability does he have to make you fake gods work for him?" His expression was hysterical. That person said indifferently, "Don't underestimate the young lord, because sooner or later, he will let you taste true despair. This imperial preceptor wants to taste it now. If you have the guts, call him back and fight one-on-one with this imperial preceptor." The imperial preceptor roared again and again. The meat that had reached his mouth did not fall off just like that. This kind of sullen feeling almost made him go crazy. "One-on-one? Don't you feel ashamed to say such words?" That person laughed mockingly. The other 9 people also revealed looks of disdain towards the imperial preceptor. A dignified fake god actually wanted to fight a 4-star war emperor one-on-one? Wasn't this a joke? Whoosh! The 10 of them did not waste any more words and rushed into the sky one after another, landing beside Elder Qin. The 2 people who were blocking Elder Qin immediately became nervous. The 10 of them looked at the 2 of them and did not say a word. Bringing Elder Qin, they turned around and left. "Halt!" The imperial preceptor was unable to restrain his anger as he shouted, "What kind of place do you think the imperial city is? How can you come and go as you please?" But the 10 of them did not pay attention to him at all. The imperial preceptor was about to chase after them when Emperor Hong reached out to stop him. He shook his head and said, "Forget it." The imperial preceptor raised his eyebrows and said, "Emperor Hong, they are openly provoking the imperial power." But without waiting for the imperial preceptor to finish speaking, Emperor Hong opened his mouth and said, "Of course this old man knows that they are deliberately provoking us, but what can we do if we leave them behind?" The imperial preceptor fell silent. The other party had 10 fake gods. Including Elder Qin, it was 11. Although he and Emperor Hong were both peak fake gods, and there were still 3 fake gods below them, if they really fought, it would probably be a situation where both sides would suffer. However, he was really unwilling to give up just like that. Emperor Hong patted the imperial preceptor's shoulder and comforted him. "There will be plenty of time in the future. There will always be a chance." Sigh. The imperial preceptor sighed deeply and followed Emperor Hong to the center of the plaza. The 3 old men also immediately landed behind Emperor Hong and stood respectfully. And throughout the entire process, the little prince who was sitting on the dragon throne did not say a single word. He sat there, watching all of this expressionlessly, in a trance. Everyone had the misconception that the little prince seemed to have grown several decades in an instant, giving off a profound feeling. Emperor Hong glanced at the little prince, turned his head to look at the civil and military officials, and said, "I believe that everyone has a lot of questions in their hearts right now. Raise them all. This old man will answer them one by one." The Marquis of Xiaowu was the first to walk out. He cupped his hands and said, "Lord Emperor Hong, previously, Qin Feiyong had already confirmed that the imperial advisor was forging the imperial jade seal. However, why did Lord Emperor Hong not punish the imperial advisor according to the law and instead attacked Qin Feiyong?" Emperor Hong pondered for a moment and said, "This matter is an enormous humiliation to our great Qin. This old man truly does not wish to speak of it. Lord Emperor Hong, please tell me the truth." "Yes." If Lord Emperor Hong doesn't say anything, we can't help but suspect that Lord Emperor Hong might have some selfish motives. A few prestigious old ministers stood out and said, "How dare you? As the son of the previous emperor, how could Lord Emperor Hong have any selfish motives?" The imperial advisor said angrily. "Imperial advisor, don't blame them. They said this because they are concerned about the safety of our great Qin." Emperor Hong waved his hand and said, "Yes." The imperial advisor nodded respectfully. Next, Emperor Hong swept his gaze across the civil and military officials and asked, "Do you really want to know?" Everyone nodded. The people outside the square were also curious. Sigh. Emperor Hong let out a long sigh and said, "Fine, this old man will tell everyone the truth." In fact, the previous emperor did not abdicate because he broke through to the false god realm. The previous emperor was naturally referring to the little prince's father. Everyone was bewildered. Marquis Xiao asked, "Then what is the reason?" "He's dead." Emperor Hong said. "What? His Majesty is dead? How is this possible? Who dares to kill His Majesty?" This place immediately exploded. Everyone's face was filled with disbelief. "Everyone, be quiet," Emperor Hong said. In an instant, the entire audience quieted down. Emperor Hong sighed and said, "The person who killed the emperor is none other than the emperor's own son, Qin Feiyang." Everyone once again fell into shock. Back then, the imperial advisor had something to discuss with the emperor, but the emperor was in the imperial study and did not respond for a long time. The imperial advisor felt that something was wrong and hurriedly pushed open the door of the imperial study. As a result, he found the emperor's body on the ground. And the imperial jade seal had also disappeared. When the imperial advisor saw this scene, he immediately informed this old man. When this old man rushed over, the emperor had already died. At that time, this old man was very angry. Someone actually dared to murder the emperor of my great Qin. So, this old man immediately asked the imperial advisor to send someone to look for this murderer, but this person did it too secretly, and we had no trace of him at all. Later, this old man and the imperial advisor discussed and decided to set up a trap to lure this person out. Emperor Hong said. Marquis Xiao said, "So, you announced to the outside world that His Majesty had broken through to the false god realm and was going to give up the throne to the little prince?" "Yes." This person killed the emperor and took away the imperial jade seal. He definitely wants to get his hands on my great Qin's rivers and mountains. Thinking of this old man immediately asked the imperial advisor to forge an imperial jade seal and announce the news of the little prince's succession. If this person is really coveting my great Qin's rivers and mountains, he will definitely appear on the day of the little prince's succession. Sure enough, as we expected, this person appeared. But this old man never thought that he was actually Qin Feiyang. Emperor Hong said with a pained heart, "Bastard! For the sake of the throne, he even killed his own father. This Qin Feiyang is simply crazy." Everyone immediately roared. "Isn't that so? But we also know that Qin Feiyang has a false god protecting him, so when Qin Feiyang took out the imperial jade seal, Emperor Hong did not expose him at the first moment. Instead, he attacked me together with old Qin. He did this to lure out the false god beside Qin Feiyang," the imperial advisor said. "So that's how it is." Everyone nodded in realization. Marquis Qianwu asked, "In that case, old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army also had a part in killing His Majesty?" "Yes. They have long been bribed by Qin Feiyang." Emperor Hong nodded. "How preposterous. His Majesty's kindness to them is as heavy as a mountain. They actually colluded with Qin Feiyang to secretly harm His Majesty and usurp the throne. They deserve to die 10,000 times." A furious roar sounded out from the crowd. It was Zhuge Wu Ho who was roaring. He was fanning the flames, because this way, everyone's hatred for Qin Feiyang and the other two would rise to a whole new level. As expected. Hearing his words, everyone present was filled with anger. Wait. But suddenly, a voice sounded. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice, only to see that the one who spoke was Marquis Xiao. "Marquis Xiao, do you have any other questions?" the imperial advisor asked patiently. Marquis Xiao said, "This subject does not dare to doubt Lord Emperor Hong's words, but after this subject finished listening, a few difficult questions arose in his heart." "Speak." Emperor Hong said. As far as I know, when the previous emperor created the imperial jade seal, he had fused with the purple gold dragon blood. As for the imperial advisor, even you, Lord Emperor Hong, could not distinguish the fake imperial jade seal. It is enough to see that it must have also fused with the purple gold dragon blood. But in today's world, only Qin Feiyong has the purple gold dragon blood. And before, Qin Feiyong also said that the imperial advisor went to him to ask for the purple gold dragon blood, and Qin Feiyong also left a mark at the bottom. I want to ask, if Qin Feiyong really wants to usurp the throne, why did he give the imperial advisor the purple gold dragon blood? This is the first question. The second. Qin Feiyong is not stupid. On the contrary, he is very smart. His Majesty is dead, and the imperial jade seal is missing. It is impossible for him not to know. Once he takes out the imperial jade seal, it is equivalent to admitting that he secretly harmed His Majesty. So in my opinion, this is very unreasonable. Frankly speaking, not to mention a shrewd person like Qin Feiyong, even if it was a stupid person like me, I would not take out the imperial jade seal in public when the little prince succeeded the throne. Marquis Xiao said. If Qin Feiyong was here, he would definitely look at Marquis Xiao in a new light. Among the civil and military officials and the various marquises, there was at least one person with a little rationality. This old man has also thought about these two questions carefully. According to this old man's analysis, Qin Feiyong should have full confidence in himself and doesn't care if the matter is exposed. After all, everyone saw just now that he has a total of 10 false gods by his side. If he is exposed, he can suppress them with force. But what he didn't expect was that the imperial advisor's cultivation had broken through some time ago. A peak false god can completely restrain 3 or 4 ordinary false gods. The imperial advisor, this old man, and these 3 close friends behind this old man made him fearful and did not dare to continue fighting with the little prince. Therefore, he chose to retreat. But this old man believes that sooner or later, he will make a comeback. Therefore, this old man hopes that no matter who sees Qin Feiyong in the future, they will report to the imperial advisor as soon as possible. Emperor Hong said. This subject obeys. The ministers bowed and said. Marquis Xiao pondered for a moment, then said, what Lord Emperor Hong said makes sense, but not long ago, Qin Feiyong also said in public that he would not fight with the little prince for the throne. This is just his one-sided words. When we get rid of the imperial advisor, we might not only kill the little prince, but also kill everyone who stops him, including this old man's great-grandfather. Emperor Hong said. Marquis Xiao took a deep breath, bowed and said, if it is really as Lord Emperor Hong said, then this Qin Feiyong is really crazy. Emperor Hong looked at him indifferently, then scanned the crowd and asked, who else has a question? The group of ministers shook their heads. Zhuge Wuhou glanced at the ministers beside him, his eyes flashing slightly as he stepped forward and said, this subject has a question. Speak. Emperor Hong said. Zhuge Wuhou said, this old subject would like to ask, does the little prince's succession still count? Of course. Right now, the little prince is the emperor of my great Qin. The imperial advisor will personally assist him, and all of you must serve the little prince wholeheartedly. Emperor Hong said. We obey Emperor Hong's orders. The ministers knelt down. Greetings, Your Majesty. Chapter 1387. At the same time, Qin Feiyong drove the ancient castle and fled into a deep mountain forest. This place was hundreds of thousands of miles away from the imperial capital. And along the way, he didn't leave any traces. Unless there was someone like Mu Qing beside the imperial tutor and Emperor Hong, it would be difficult to find him. However, up until now, he was still in a half-awake state. He couldn't figure out why Emperor Hong would do this. This Emperor Hong's performance is really puzzling. Lu Zhang and the commander of the Kirin army also frowned. Wolf King, Fatso, Wang Yongfeng, and the others also had a worried look on their faces. Qin Feiyong's plan this time could be said to be flawless. It had even succeeded. But they never thought that because of Emperor Hong, this plan would fail. They couldn't figure it out. Why did Emperor Hong treat Qin Feiyong like this? Why did Qin Feiyong do this? Wasn't it for the safety of the great Qin Empire? For the sake of the millions of people? It could be said that in this matter, Qin Feiyong didn't have any selfish motives. He just wanted to get rid of the imperial tutor and the Zhuge family, this cancer, and return peace to the great Qin Empire. But why did Emperor Hong still do such a thing to hurt Qin Feiyong's heart? Time passed breath by breath. Buzz! Suddenly, Qin Feiyong's image crystal sounded. Everyone was awakened at this moment and looked at Qin Feiyong. Whew! Qin Feiyong took a deep breath, calmed down his emotions, and took out the image crystal. Yan Wei's shadow immediately condensed. Something bad is going on. Seeing Qin Feiyong, Yan Wei immediately said, his face full of anxiety. Hearing this, everyone's face immediately sank. With Yan Wei's character, under normal circumstances, he would never be so anxious. Qin Feiyong asked, "What's the matter?" "Emperor Hong and the Imperial Advisor framed you, saying that you killed the Emperor in the Imperial study and stole the Imperial Jade Seal." Yan Wei immediately explained the situation after Qin Feiyong left in detail. "What a bunch of lies! Too much, too much. This old thing, how can he slander boss like this?" After listening, Fatso was furious. Wolf King, Lu Hong, Ren Wushuang, Wang Yongfeng, and the others were also furious. We all know that Emperor Hong is slandering young master, but the people of Great Qin don't know. Right now, the entire imperial capital is abuzz with rumors that the young master is a heartless person who doesn't even recognize his own family. Young master, I really feel sorry for you. You've worked so hard to protect Great Qin, but what's the result? Not only did he not get any benefits, but he also ended up with a bad reputation. Yan Wei sighed. Fatso and the others also looked at Qin Feiyong, their faces full of grief and indignation. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and said, "Before doing this, I never thought that I would be able to get any benefits." "You can still laugh." Wolf King glared at him. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and shook his head. "If it were before, my heart would definitely be like you, filled with anger and unwillingness. But now, these can no longer affect my emotions. Your endurance is really admirable." Lei Bao snorted coldly. There was a trace of ridicule in his words. Lu Zheng heard Lei Bao's words, shook his head and sighed. "This is not a question of whether I can endure it or not." "Then what is it?" Lei Bao raised his eyebrows. "It's a kind of despair. Right now, little cousin doesn't have any hope for the Great Qin, the descendants of the Qin bloodline, or Emperor Hong. In short, he has completely given up on Emperor Hong and the others. So these things naturally can't affect him." Lu Zheng said. Lei Bao fell silent. It didn't understand before why a noble son of an emperor would fall to such a state. Why did he hate the people of the imperial palace so much? But now it understood. This was all forced out of him by his family. Qin Feiyong glanced at Lu Zheng. He didn't expect this amazing cousin to know him so well. He looked at Yan Wei and asked, "Is the imperial preceptor already suspecting your identity?" Yan Wei was stunned and puzzled. "No, why do you say that? Since he doesn't suspect you, why didn't he tell you about breaking through to the peak of the pseudo-divinity realm?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. "So that's it." Yan Wei suddenly understood and said with a smile, "There's no problem because even Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Nanhua, and the others don't know that he has broken through." Qin Feiyong let out a long breath and shook his head. "I thought he had found out about your identity and deliberately hid it from you." Yan Wei said, "This old fox is so cautious. He hides many things in his heart. Then you'd better be careful. Don't let him get hold of your weakness." Qin Feiyong reminded. "I understand." Yan Wei nodded. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and said, "By the way, there's one more thing that I only learned about after." "What is it?" Qin Feiyong asked. Yan Wei said, "The chief eunuch has been killed." Qin Feiyong said with a cold smile, "This old fogey is really vicious and merciless." Yan Wei glanced at the Kirin army commander beside Qin Feiyong and said, "Also, old Qin and the commander have been accused of treason by the imperial preceptor." "What?" The Kirin army commander's body stiffened. Fatso glanced at the Kirin army commander and snorted, "You were clearly doing it for the good of the Great Qin, but in the end, you were accused of treason. Now you can understand how boss felt in the past, right?" The Kirin army commander's face was full of bitter smiles. Frankly speaking, he was indeed very dissatisfied with Qin Feiyong's way of doing things in the past. But at that time, it was because he didn't understand Qin Feiyong. After this incident, he understood that he couldn't blame Qin Feiyong. Fatso suddenly looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, Boss, don't you still have the Emperor's handwritten edict? Will this handwritten order be of any use now? The Kirin army commander was stunned and hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "What edict?" Qin Feiyong took out the edict and threw it to the Kirin army commander. The Kirin army commander opened it and looked, and a trace of anger crept up his face. He understood the Emperor's personality. This edict must have been written by Qin Feiyong. Lu Zheng looked at the Kirin army commander, then looked at the edict and shook his head. This edict is meaningless. Yes, Emperor Hong is determined to harm me. When I take out the edict, he will definitely say that I forced him to write it before killing the Emperor. Moreover, I was the one who forced the Emperor to write this decree, Qin Feiyong said. Lu Zheng looked at Qin Feiyong and the Kirin army commander, and said, "It seems that there is only one way to prove your innocence." "What way?" the Kirin army commander asked. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "Is there a need to say? Naturally, we will find the Emperor and let him stand up and explain everything." "Good idea." The Kirin army commander's eyes lit up. "Good idea?" Qin Feiyong sneered. The Emperor had long wanted to kill him, and the current situation was probably what the Emperor was looking forward to. How could he stand up and help him? The Kirin army commander said, "I know you have a prejudice against His Majesty, but His Majesty is not an unreasonable person. When he knows the truth, when he knows that you are doing all this for the good of the great Qin, he will definitely help us. Don't be naive. Can't you see the current Emperor clearly? Except for himself, no one has anything to do with him." Fatso sneered. "He won't. I believe that His Majesty is not such an unreasonable person." The Kirin army commander shook his head. "You really won't give up until you hit the wall. In that case, boss, immediately send him to Yuzhou and let him die with a clear understanding," Fatso said. Hearing this, Qin Feiyong looked at the Kirin army commander and said, "You really want to go?" "Yes." The Kirin army commander nodded. "Well, I will fulfill your wish." Qin Feiyong took out the space-time gate, handed it to Wang Yishan, and said, "Accompany him to Yuzhou." "Yes." Wang Yishan respectfully responded and grabbed the space-time gate. Immediately, Qin Feiyong waved his hand and sent the two of them out. Fatso snorted coldly and said, "This Kirin army commander is really hopelessly stupid. But it is undeniable that he is a selfless person like Elder Qin," Lu Zheng said with a smile. "That's true." Fatso nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at Yan Wei and said, "Have you found out the identity of the 10 fake gods that appeared later?" Hearing Qin Feiyong's question, Fatso and the others all looked at Lu Zheng. "I haven't found out." Yan Wei shook his head. "Strange. Who are they?" Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. To be able to dispatch 10 fake gods at once, in the entire Great Qin Empire, there was probably only. Thinking of this, he suddenly turned his head to look at Lu Zheng. Lu Zheng touched his nose and said, "Why are you looking at me? I didn't do anything." "Stop pretending." Fatso rolled his eyes at Lu Zheng and looked at Qin Feiyong with a smile. "Boss, not long ago, we saw with our own eyes that he sent a message to Second Grandpa asking for help." "Is he really from the Lu family?" Qin Feiyong was stunned and then frowned. "Then why did he call me young master?" "Well, of course it's to hide his identity. Because if you can think of it, the Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong can also think of it. In the entire Great Qin Empire, only my Lu family can dispatch 10 fake gods at once. Calling you young master in public is to make Emperor Hong and the others mistakenly think that they are your subordinates. This way, they will not think of my Lu family," Lu Zheng said. Qin Feiyong suddenly understood. Fatso shook his head and said, "Your Lu family is so strong. Fat Lord really doesn't understand. What are you afraid of?" Lu Zheng said, "I'm also very curious, but Second Grandpa just won't say, but my big brother should know." "Your big brother?" Everyone looked at him suspiciously. "My big brother is a true demon-level genius," said Qin Wentian. Lu Zheng smiled proudly. "How monstrous is he?" Everyone was curious. "You will know how monstrous he is when you see him in the future. In short, he is the most promising person in my Lu family to step into the war god realm," Lu Zheng said mysteriously. Gasp! Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Chapter 1388. Yan Wei came back to his senses, looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "What's your next step?" What do you think? Qin Feiyang asked. I don't know. But I know that you won't give up after suffering such a big loss this time. Yan Wei said with a smile. Of course. Wait for me for a while. I'll contact Lu Xingchen and Elder Qin first. Qin Feiyang said. Okay. Yan Wei nodded. After saying that, the virtual image dissipated. Qin Feiyang also immediately sent a message to Elder Qin. Bas. After a short while, Elder Qin's virtual image appeared. Behind Old Man Qin was a stretch of mountains and rivers that stretched as far as the eye could see. How are you doing now? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. Why are you still smiling at this time? Elder Qin stared at Qin Feiyang and said, Give me your current coordinates. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. After giving Elder Qin the coordinates, he sent a message to Lu Xingchen. Subsequently, Qin Feiyang left the castle and stood in the void above the mountain range, waiting quietly. Not long after, Elder Qin and Lu Xingchen arrived one after another. I didn't expect that the two of us would make a mistake. As soon as Lu Xingchen appeared, he looked at Qin Feiyang and shook his head with a bitter smile. His words were full of self-mockery. Yes, we were one step behind. Qin Feiyang nodded and sighed. You're not gods. It's normal to miscalculate. Elder Qin rolled his eyes at the two of them, looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Where's the commander of the Kirin army? He went to find the emperor. Qin Feiyang said. Why did he go to find the emperor? Elder Qin raised his eyebrows. He wants the emperor to stand up and help us. Qin Feiyang said. Alas! The little prince has succeeded to the throne. With the protection of the emperor and the imperial advisor, even if the emperor were to return now, he would still be powerless to reverse the situation. Old Qin sighed. Lu Xingchen listened to their conversation and frowned. You guys really know where the emperor is? It has something to do with you. Old Mr. Qin looked at Lu Xingchen. Since it's a cooperation, we should be honest with each other, right? Lu Xingchen said. All right, now is not the time for internal strife. This time, I fell into the hands of Emperor Hong and the imperial advisor. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I'm very unhappy. Qin Feiyang said, his eyes flashing with cold light. Then what do you want? Lu Xingchen was stunned and asked curiously. However, old Qin's expression changed abruptly as he hurriedly said, Brat, don't act recklessly. It wasn't easy for us to escape. The imperial advisor had already stepped into the peak of the false god realm. Coupled with Emperor Hong, the current imperial capital was equivalent to a dragon's pool and tiger's den. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Don't worry, I won't act recklessly. However, I need your cooperation. Lu Xingchen said, As long as you can vent this anger, no matter what you ask me to do, I'm willing to do it. This time, the imperial advisor and Emperor Hong had completely angered him. Old Qin looked at the two of them and hesitated for a moment. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, As long as you don't do anything to harm the great Qin Empire, this old man has no objections. All right then, come closer. Qin Feiyang said in a low voice. The two of them looked at each other and walked in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang immediately muttered in a low voice. After listening to Qin Feiyang's plan, Lu Xingchen and old Qin couldn't help but frown. What's wrong? You still don't dare? Qin Feiyang asked. Lu Xingchen said in a deep voice, This is not child's play. The imperial advisor and Emperor Hong are both supreme existences at the peak of the false god realm. With old Qin and my strength, we can't beat them at all. Qin Feiyang said, Don't worry about that. As long as you rush over, I'll give you Chang Shui in case you need it. That's good. With Chang Shui here, we might even be able to counterattack. Lu Xingchen's eyes lit up. Counterattack? You're thinking too much. With their strength, if they want to escape, even if we have Chang Shui, we won't be able to stop them. Old Qin snorted. Lu Xingchen smiled embarrassedly and said, I'm just saying. Old Qin, why take it seriously? Old Qin looked at Qin Feiyang and nodded. All right, we'll be the bait. You're in charge of eradicating the Zhuge family. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Chang Shui appeared. Lu Xingchen's eyes lit up with greed. Qin Feiyang handed Chang Shui to old Qin and said telepathically, Be careful of Lu Xingchen. He's been coveting Chang Shui for a long time. Also, This is the last time I'll trust you. Please don't disappoint me again. Old Qin didn't say anything. He looked deeply at Qin Feiyang and reached out to grab Chang Shui. Seeing that Chang Shui had fallen into Old Qin's hands, Lu Xingchen felt very depressed. Be careful. Go. Qin Feiyang reminded them and waved his hand. Phew. Old Qin let out a long breath. He put away Chang Shui and opened a portal. He exchanged glances with Lu Xingchen, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He turned around and rushed into the portal. Qin Feiyang immediately took out his image crystal. Bas. Yan Wei's shadow appeared. Qin Feiyang said, "Go to the Imperial Preceptor's side and stay there. Lu Xingchen and Old Qin will find trouble with the Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong. After the Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong leave, immediately send me a message." After that, he briefly explained the plan to Yan Wei. Okay. Yan Wei nodded, turned off the image crystal, then opened a portal and descended in front of a lake. This was Emperor Hong's residence. By the lake, the Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong sat opposite each other. Yan Wei said respectfully, "Greetings, Emperor Hong, Imperial Preceptor." The two nodded. The Imperial Preceptor asked, "Has His Majesty Hao Tian's mood stabilized?" "I can't see it." Yan Wei shook his head. "Why can't you see it?" The Imperial Preceptor was suspicious. Yan Wei said, "Since returning to the palace, His Majesty Hao Tian has been sitting on the dragon throne without saying a word. This lowly one's eyes are dull, and I really can't see anything. Sigh. It's really hard for him to lose his father and mother at such a young age." Emperor Hong sighed. Yes. In the face of such a blow, even an adult wouldn't be able to bear it, let alone someone so young. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. After all, as an emperor sooner or later, he will face these problems. Now, let's talk about Lu Xingchen and those 10 fake gods. The identity of these people must be investigated clearly. The Imperial Preceptor said. His eyes filled with killing intent. Emperor Hong said, "Lu Xingchen's problem, this old man has thought about it carefully. There is only one explanation for his situation." What? The Imperial Preceptor was surprised. Possession. Emperor Hong said word by word, his old eyes flashing. Possession? The Imperial Preceptor's eyes trembled. Possession, only a war god can do it. If Emperor Hong's guess is true, then in Lu Xingchen's body, wouldn't there be a war god's soul hidden? Emperor Hong said, "As for those 10 fake gods, this old man can't see through them." Yan Wei asked carefully, "Could it be the Lu family?" Lu family? The Imperial Preceptor's brows raised, looking at Emperor Hong and said, "It seems that only the Lu family has this ability." This old man also thought about the Lu family. But if they are really from the Lu family, then when facing Qin Feiyang, they shouldn't be so respectful. However, you all also heard that they addressed Qin Feiyang as young master. From this, it can be seen that their identity is Qin Feiyang's subordinates. Emperor Hong said. The Imperial Preceptor nodded and said, "That's right, the Lu family's people are all Qin Feiyang's relatives. Calling him young master is not too likely." Yan Wei said again, "Then could it be people from Forgotten Continent?" Forgotten Continent. Emperor Hong and the Imperial Preceptor looked at each other. Don't say. There really was this possibility. After all, these years, Qin Feiyang had always been in Forgotten Continent. And Forgotten Continent was also a place where powerhouses were as common as clouds. Possession, 10 false gods. Emperor Hong muttered. Just who was hiding in Lu Xingchen's body? And just what were the identities of those 10 false gods? Suddenly, Emperor Hong looked at the Imperial Preceptor and said, "Imperial Preceptor, why don't you go to Forgotten Continent to investigate?" This. The moment the Imperial Preceptor heard this, a trace of dread crawled up in his eyes. That Snow Python's methods were still vivid in his mind even now. Boom! Right at this moment. At a certain time in the Imperial Palace, an earth-shaking loud explosion sounded out. N. The Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong were startled, hurriedly rushing up to the sky, looking towards the sky above the Imperial Palace. What happened? Yan Wei's gaze flashed, also hurriedly following up, a look of bewilderment on his face. Emperor Hong said in a deep voice, "The sound seems to be Jilai Little Prince's bedroom. Quickly go take a look." The Imperial Preceptor's expression changed, and he immediately opened the teleportation gate, following which the three people rushed in like lightning. Almost in the next instant, they descended above the little prince's bedroom. And at this moment, what bedroom was there? It was a ruin, dust billowing. Two lords, quickly look, it's Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen. Yan Wei suddenly pointed to the distant void and roared. Emperor Hong and the Imperial Preceptor suddenly raised their heads to look, and immediately saw Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen grabbing the little prince, fleeing out of the city. Still dare to come back and cause trouble, simply don't know life from death. The two people's hair fluttered in anger, a monstrous killing intent erupted from their bodies, unleashing their speed, chasing after Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen. What? They actually kidnapped His Majesty the White Sky? The two of them really aren't afraid of death. It must be Qin Fei Yong, that bastard, who ordered it. Looks like Emperor Hong was right. This bastard has always been thinking about the throne. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen come and kidnap His Majesty the White Sky. I don't know what this Old Man Qin is thinking. In the past, he was highly respected and revered by the world. But now, he actually ruined his reputation for a deranged bastard. The people in the major cities below raised their heads to look at Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen, their eyes filled with disgust. There were also people discussing in the imperial palace. When Yan Wei heard these words, he felt very uncomfortable in his heart. Wasn't Qin Fei Yong doing this to protect Great Qin's rivers and mountains and its people? But these people actually scolded Qin Fei Yong like this. It was really too much. But he ignored it, found a place where there was no one, and sent a message to Qin Fei Yong. Bas. Qin Fei Yong's image appeared. Yan Wei said, "The Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong have been lured away." Very good. Qin Fei Yong smiled coldly. Yan Wei said again, "All right, if there's a chance, you can go and meet Marquis Xiao, because according to my observation, this person is a reasonable person. Perhaps he will be useful to us in the future." Marquis Xiao, Qin Fei Yong murmured and nodded. All right. Of course, he knew this person, but they didn't have much interaction before. With that, Qin Fei Yong turned off the image crystal, killing intent surging out of his eyes, and shouted, "Everyone, prepare for battle." Inside the ancient castle. Chapter 1389. Zhuge Mansion. Because of the Imperial Grandmaster's secret care, coupled with Zhuge Mingyang's monstrous talent, the current Zhuge family could be said to be like the sun in the sky. Among the 100 great marquis, Zhuge Wuhou was already firmly seated on the throne of number 1. At this moment, Zhuge family's meeting hall. Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Nangong, and Zhuge Nanhua sat upright at the table. Below, a guard commander stood respectfully and reported to the three of them about Elder Qin and Lu Xingchen kidnapping the little prince. After listening, Zhuge Wuhou's face was terrifyingly gloomy. Zhuge Nanhua looked at Zhuge Wuhou and waved to the guard commander. "You can leave first. If there's any news, inform us immediately." "Yes," the guard commander respectfully replied, then turned around and left in large strides. Zhuge Nanhua waved his hand again, and the door closed with a bang. He then looked at Zhuge Wuhou and comforted him. "Xiao Xian, you don't have to worry. With the ancestor and Emperor Hong here, Elder Qin and Lu Xingchen wouldn't dare to harm Haotian." Elder Qin and Lu Xingchen wouldn't dare. But what about Qin Fei Yong? These two people came to kidnap Haotian. It must be Qin Fei Yong who planned this behind the scenes. Don't you understand Qin Fei Yong? In this world, there is nothing he doesn't dare to do. Although Haotian is only a puppet in the hands of Ancestor Yun, he is still my flesh and blood, a descendant of my Zhuge family. Zhuge Wuhou said in grief and indignation. Hearing the latter half of his words, Zhuge Nanhua's expression changed, and he hurriedly made a shushing gesture and said, "Be careful of the walls having ears." Zhuge Nangong also looked around vigilantly, looked at Zhuge Wuhou, and said in a low voice, "In the future, you are not allowed to say such things again." What are you afraid of? Although the great Qin is still surnamed Qin, the control is already in the hands of my Zhuge family. So what if someone hears it? Zhuge Wuhou coldly snorted. "Shut up!" Zhuge Nanhua shouted coldly, "You can be arrogant, but don't forget your limits. The great Qin Empire is not as simple as you think." That's right. Let's not talk about the fake gods in the back mountain of the Imperial Palace. Let's focus on the Lu family. Even though the old ancestor has something on the Liu clan, if the Liu clan finds out that the little prince is a descendant of our Zhuge clan, they will definitely not let this matter rest. The Liu family's strength is unfathomable. Even now, we still don't know how strong they are. If we really provoke them, it won't do us any good. Zhuge Nangong said with a solemn expression on his face. Hearing their words, Zhuge Wuhou quivered and finally calmed down. So you all thought that the little prince was a descendant of the Zhuge family. But at this moment, a cold voice suddenly resounded in the hall. Who? Zhuge Wuhou and the other two turned pale with fright. There was actually someone hiding here. Wait a minute. This voice. It seemed to be Qin Feiyang. Damn it. How could it be him? Why is he here? The next moment, Qin Feiyang appeared in the air. The moment they saw Qin Feiyang appear, a trace of fear involuntarily crawled onto their faces. How did you get in? What did you mean by that sentence just now? Zhuge Wuhou said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, I have the invisibility technique and 2 spatial divine objects. If I want to enter your Zhuge family, wouldn't it be easy? As for that sentence. At this point, Qin Feiyang laughed in ridicule and asked, could it be that you have never doubted the identity of the little prince? Is there a problem with his identity? Zhuge Wuhou said in a deep voice. It seems that I have to make it clearer. I already know about you and that woman. I also know that the first prince is the illegitimate son of the 2 of you. And it is precisely because of your relationship with that woman that you have taken it for granted that the little prince is also your son all these years. But that's not the case. Qin Feiyang said. This. Zhuge Wuhou was stunned. In the past, I was the same as you. I thought that the little prince should be the same as the first prince, the illegitimate son of you and that woman. I even wanted to kill him. But to be on the safe side, I verified his identity. While the emperor and the little prince were not paying attention, I took their blood and put it in the water. Guess what the result was? Qin Feiyang said playfully. Don't keep me in suspense. Hurry up and say it. Zhuge Wuhou growled. Is there a need to say that? The little prince has nothing to do with you at all. He is the son of the emperor and the empress. It is also because of this that I did not kill him and even helped him ascend to the throne. Qin Feiyang laughed. How could this be? Zhuge Wuhou muttered, his face filled with disbelief. Zhuge Nanhua anxiously said, Xiao Xian, he is trying to sow discord, don't be fooled by him. Zhuge Wuhou's real name was Zhuge Xiao Xian. Qin Feiyang laughed faintly. At this time, do I still need to lie to you? Impossible. That woman clearly told me that the little prince is my own flesh and blood. Zhuge Wuhou shook his head crazily, as if he was about to collapse. Qin Feiyang was slightly startled. The little prince was born of that woman, so she should know whose child he was. But why did she lie to Zhuge Wuhou? Thinking about it carefully, Qin Feiyang revealed a look of realization. Then, Qin Feiyang raised his head and looked at Zhuge Wuhou, and laughed. That woman is very smart. She knows that once you find out that the little prince is not your son, you and the imperial tutor will definitely think of ways to kill the little prince. After all, she is a mother and loves her son dearly. But this is only secondary. She is even more afraid of angering you. Because she understands the imperial tutor's personality and methods, so in order to protect herself, she lied that the little prince is your son. Of course. We can't rule out another possibility. She has her own ambitions and doesn't want to be controlled and manipulated by you. Qin Feiyang laughed. Damned woman. Zhuge Wuhou clenched his fists tightly, his old eyes bloodshot. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, She indeed deserves to die, otherwise I wouldn't have killed her. Xiao Xian, calm down, don't be fooled. Whether or not the little prince is your flesh and blood, we will know after Ancestor Yun rescues him. Zhuge Nanhua thought. He had always thought that Qin Feiyang was trying to sow discord. That's right. I haven't even personally verified it. Why would I be angry? Zhuge Wuhou suddenly came to a realization, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said in a deep voice, Did you come to my Zhuge family just to tell us this? Of course not. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then why? Zhuge Wuhou raised his eyebrows. Is there a need to ask? Qin Feiyang looked at Zhuge Wuhou strangely, and laughed. The little prince has just ascended to the throne, and I came to your Zhuge family. Do you think it would be a good thing? Hearing this, The three of them trembled. All right, I'll tell you guys clearly. The reason why I asked Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen to kidnap the little prince was purely to lure the imperial tutor and Emperor Hong away. Because if they are in the imperial city, they will hinder me from eradicating your Zhuge family. Qin Feiyang laughed. Boom. Hearing this, Zhuge Wuhou and the other two immediately blasted open the roof with surging emperor's might and rushed out like lightning. Qin Feiyang has come to invade. Elders, please come out and kill the enemy. In the next moment, Zhuge Wuhou's voice sounded in the sky above the Zhuge mansion. What? Qin Feiyang is here. This demon is vicious and merciless. He kills without batting an eye. Everyone, run. The Zhuge family was instantly in chaos. Boom. At the same time, a terrifying aura erupted from the ground in the center of the mansion. Following closely, 10 figures rushed out from the ground. There were men and women among the 10, and they all looked rather old. The aura they emitted was that of a 9-star war emperor. Where is Qin Feiyang? The 10 of them flew to the side of Zhuge Wuhou and the other two, and asked with a murderous aura. He's in the main hall. Zhuge Wuhou pointed to the broken meeting hall below. One of them said in a deep voice, "We'll go and pin him down. You inform Ancestor Yun immediately." All right. Zhuge Wuhou nodded. It's too late. Qin Feiyang's calm voice sounded from the main hall. Boom. Before he could finish, waves of shocking emperor's might and ferocious beasts rushed out from the main hall. The broken meeting hall was instantly reduced to ashes. Zhuge Wuhou and the others immediately saw that in the dust, there were 3 ferocious beasts and a group of 9-star war emperor. That's right. They were Lei Bao, Seal, Seahorse, Wang Yongfeng and the others. Qin Feiyang raised his head and glanced at Zhuge Wuhou and the others, and said word by word, "I want the entire Zhuge family to die, not a single blade of grass to grow, not an inch of land to be left. Kill." Lei Bao and the other two, Wang Yongfeng and the others, let out a long roar in unison. Swoosh. Lei Bao took the lead. The power of thunder all over his body was like a raging wave, rolling and roaring. One of the old women roared, "Everyone, don't be afraid. They are only 9-star war emperor." But before she could finish speaking, Lei Bao laughed and waved his thick claws. The power of thunder covered the sky and covered the earth. The old woman screamed and died on the spot. What? So strong. Zhuge Wuhou and the others' expressions changed. Boom. At this moment, the seahorse, the leopard, Wang Yongfeng, and the others unleashed their auras too. Zhuge Wuhou and the others were instantly petrified. The aura that these people and ferocious beasts released was actually all at the peak of the 9-star war emperor realm. How is this possible? The last time they came, they were only ordinary 9-star war emperor and 9-star emperor beast? The group of people were filled with disbelief. How long had it been, and they had all stepped into the peak realm? Even if they had opened all the doors of potential, it was impossible to do so. Just as the group of people were distracted, another old man died tragically under Lei Bao's claws. Seahorse, Seal, Wang Yongfeng and the others had already arrived in front of Zhuge Wuhou and the others. Quickly inform Ancestor Yun. Zhuge Wuhou suddenly came back to his senses and roared. At the same time, without hesitation, he activated his battle soul and evolved his divine art. A mighty divine power surged out. Zhuge Nanhua and the others were the same. In short, at this moment, they did not dare to hold back. Battle Soul. Divine Art. Chapter 1390. Shua. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the white-eyed wolf appeared. I haven't come out to play for so long. I wonder if anyone still remembers me now? The white-eyed wolf scanned its surroundings, its eyes filled with hope. This closed-door training was the longest in its life. However, it was very satisfied with the results of its closed-door training. 3-star war emperor. He was only one step away from catching up to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at it and said, "Stop acting cool, quickly deprive them of their battle souls, and give them a show of strength." You're looking down on me, right? What show of strength? To think that you can say that. At the very least, I was once an invincibly handsome wolf whose name spread all over the world. Making them afraid, making them despair, is my style, understand? The white-eyed wolf said with dissatisfaction. I think it's notorious. Qin Feiyong was speechless. TSK. A boring person like you will never understand my charm. The white-eyed wolf glanced at Qin Feiyong with disdain. Its entire body emitted a dazzling golden light, and a terrifying aura spread out from its body. Charm. Qin Feiyong's face twitched. He really couldn't tell what kind of charm this ruffian wolf had. What aura? At the same time, sensing the Wolf King's aura, Zhuge Wuhou and the others' faces were filled with bewilderment. This aura was actually not very strong, but it gave them a great sense of danger. Come out! The white-eyed wolf roared, and a bright golden light soared into the sky. The next step was smooth. Between heaven and earth, a huge beast shadow appeared. However, they were unable to see its true appearance clearly. They could only see a blurry outline, and could not tell what kind of beast it was. At this moment, not only Zhuge Wuhou and the others, but the entire Zhuge family, and even the entire inner city, couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. That enormous beast shadow was like an ancient giant beast that had descended into the world. It was indomitable and intimidating in all directions. You pieces of trash dare to activate your fighting soul in front of me. You don't know your place. Take it away. The white-eyed wolf looked at Zhuge Wuhou and the others, his eyes filled with contempt. As it roared, the golden beast suddenly opened its mouth, and a gust of wind blew. The battle souls of Zhuge Wuhou and the others immediately flew towards the golden beast figure uncontrollably. What happened? Everyone's expression changed. Zhuge Wuhou suddenly thought of something and roared, "Not good, everyone quickly put away your battle souls." Back then, Mingyong told me that this ruffian wolf's innate ability can devour and take away the battle souls of living beings. When Zhuge Nanhua and the rest heard this, their faces turned pale and they immediately withdrew their fighting souls. However, they were shocked to discover that they had lost contact with their fighting souls. Finally, they watched helplessly as their battle souls were swallowed by the golden beast shadow in one gulp. Damn it! The group of people immediately checked the fighting soul and were shocked to find that the fighting soul in the Qi Si had really disappeared. In an instant, they fell into deep panic and despair. Amazing! Awesome! Wang Yongfeng and the rest, Lei Bao and the other two beasts, were dumbfounded. After being together for so long, they had naturally heard of the white-eyed wolf's fighting soul. However, this was the first time they had seen it with their own eyes. It could actually take away the fighting soul. Oh my god! This was too heaven-defying. What kind of monster was it? In the future, who would dare to activate their fighting soul in front of it? Hey! The white-eyed wolf smiled proudly and the golden beast shadow instantly disappeared. Qin Feiyong did not say anything and directly waved his hand, sending the white-eyed wolf to the ancient castle. Otherwise, with this guy's character, he would definitely continue to show off in front of him. Without your fighting soul, how are you going to fight with us? Wang Yongfeng, bring some people to kill the Zhuge family. Leave this place to us three brothers. Lei Bao shouted. The so-called three brothers were naturally Lei Bao, Hai Ma and Seal. All right. Wang Yongfeng and the rest did not hesitate and immediately scattered in all directions. Like killing gods, wherever they passed, blood dyed the ground. The battle between Lei Bao and the other two beasts and Zhuge Wuhou and the rest also began once again. Qin Feiyong rose into the air and stood above a large hall, coldly sweeping his gaze over everything. Screams, cries for help, curses, at this moment, filled every corner of the Zhuge family. One corpse after another fell down continuously. Blood was like a column, gathering into a small stream, emitting a pungent smell of blood. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong raised his head and looked in the direction of the temple. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He was not worried about the imperial preceptor and Emperor Hong at all, because Elder Qin and Lu Xingchen would think of ways to delay them. Even if someone sent them a message, they would not be able to rush back to rescue them. As for the false god in the back mountain of the imperial palace, if nothing unexpected happened, he must have entered a state of self-sealing again. Otherwise, he would have appeared by now. So, in his heart, an even bolder idea emerged. Eliminate the law enforcement hall, as well as the disciples of the Zhuge family in the temple. These people were all the imperial preceptor's minions. As long as they were all eliminated, the imperial preceptor would be alone. Of course. The imperial preceptor also controlled the invincible Black Army. However, The people of the invincible Black Army were all small fries and were not worth worrying about. At this point, shockingly, a bloody kill character appeared between Qin Feiyong's eyebrows. His whole person instantly seemed to have transformed into a killing god. That terrifying, monstrous, murderous aura was like a tide, toppling mountains and overturning seas. It instantly enveloped the Xueqi family. Immediately after, a hair-raising scene appeared. Whether it was the blood on the ground, the blood in the corpses, or the blood that flowed out from the wounds, they all rose into the air and gathered into waves of blood, surging towards Qin Feiyong. What's going on? The people of the Xueqi family who were fleeing, seeing this scene, all changed their expressions. In the end, they saw that the waves of blood actually all rushed into the space between Qin Feiyong's eyebrows. What is he doing? He's actually absorbing human blood. Is he really a demon? People panicked and fled in all directions in a panic. But facing the pursuit of Wang Yongfeng and the others, could they escape? A group of ordinary 9-star War Emperor was enough to easily kill them, not to mention a group of 9-star War Emperor Peak Realm super experts. As more and more people died, the murderous aura emitted from Qin Feiyong's body became more and more terrifying. His eyes, long hair, and even his skin seemed to be dyed with blood. And his cultivation had already risen from a 4-star War Emperor to a 9-star War Emperor. Qin Feiyong, you deserve to die. Xueqi Wuhou roared angrily, his eyes bloodshot. It's you who deserves to die. Qin Feiyong raised his head and looked at Xueqi Wuhou, his eyes filled with ruthless coldness. Swish! He took a step forward and rushed into the sky, his killing intent surging. Boom! Without saying a word, he raised his arm and slapped Xueqi Wuhou's head. Although Xueqi Wuhou's strength was not bad, under the attacks of the Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. How could he withstand Qin Feiyong's palm strike? There was no suspense. With a gotcha sound, Xueqi Wuhou's head exploded, and his flesh and blood flew everywhere. The blood that flowed out was all absorbed by the word, kill. Father! A sorrowful roar resounded through the sky and earth. Qin Feiyong looked towards the source of the voice and saw a group of young men with extraordinary temperaments flying over from afar like lightning. On their clothes, there was the symbol of the war god temple. And the person who was roaring in grief was none other than Xueqi Mingyang. I was just about to look for you, but I didn't expect you to deliver yourself to me. Qin Feiyong muttered, his eyes flashing with killing intent. Bastard! Just as Qin Feiyong was about to attack Xueqi Mingyang, Xueqi Nanhua and Xueqi Nangong suddenly roared and attacked Qin Feiyong with their divine art, Eclipse Moon. Xueqi Wuhou's death had made them completely crazy. An ant dares to compete with the sun and moon? Qin Feiyong displayed his contempt to the extreme. With a wave of his hand, he activated the 4 moves of the Void Returning Art. Wisps of invisible force burst out from the ground like a tide. The Void Returning Art had already transformed into a divine art, and its power was countless times stronger than before. When the 4 moves were used together, it could destroy heaven and earth. Although Xueqi Nanhua and Xueqi Nangong were super experts at the peak of the 9-star combat Emperor realm, they were already seriously injured. With a loud bang, the two's divine arts were instantly destroyed. The invisible energy carried monstrous divine power and mercilessly pounced on them. Accompanied by 2 shrill screams, the 2 of them splashed their blood in the sky. Their blood was also absorbed by the word, kill. Great-grandfather. Seeing Xueqi Nanhua and Xueqi Nangong die in front of him, Xueqi Mingyang roared in grief and his face was filled with hatred. A purple-clothed young man next to him stared at Qin Feiyong and suddenly said, Qin Feiyong's current power is too terrifying, let's go. I'm not leaving. I want to avenge my father and great-grandfather. Xueqi Mingyang roared. The purple-clothed young man raised his eyebrows and directly knocked Xueqi Mingyang unconscious. Then, he carried Xueqi Mingyang and turned around. With a mysterious step, he left without looking back. When the rest of the people saw this, they immediately followed the purple-clothed young man and escaped. Qin Feiyong looked at the purple-clothed young man in surprise. Previously, his attention was all on Xueqi Mingyang and he did not pay attention to the others. At this moment, after careful observation, he realized that the purple-clothed young man's aura had already reached the peak of the 9-star combat Emperor realm. Could this person be the #1 on the billboard, Xueqi Xingfeng? He had heard from Lu Xingchen that Xueqi Xingfeng was very talented and occupied the #1 spot on the billboard of the War God Temple. Moreover, he was the #1 in the War God Temple. However, he had never seen Zhuge Xingfeng before, so he was not sure. Other than the purple-clothed young man, there were 6 people whose cultivation had reached the 9-star Combat Emperor realm. The rest of them were basically between 2-star and 8-star Combat Emperor realm. Not bad. A mere martial marquis government actually has such a demon, but today, they will all die. Qin Feiyang lifted the corner of his mouth and there was a bone-piercing cold light in his eyes. Swoosh. He used the phantom steps and stepped into the air step by step. It seemed very slow, but every step he took covered a distance of more than 10 miles. Brother Feng, he's coming. A black-clothed young man turned around and his expression changed. Other than the purple-clothed young man, the rest of them were also terrified. The purple-clothed young man said in a deep voice, "Don't panic, I'm faster than him, he can't catch up with us." After saying that, he waved his hand and swept everyone up and flew towards the imperial palace at lightning speed. As a disciple of the War God Temple and a disciple of the Zhuge family, he naturally had perfect auxiliary combat skills. As for Qin Feiyang's cultivation, although it had already reached the 9-star Combat Emperor realm, it had not reached the peak, so his speed naturally could not catch up with the purple-clothed young man. Even so, the black-clothed young man and the rest could not help but be afraid. Therefore, before the purple-clothed young man finished speaking, someone immediately said, "Even if he can't catch up with us, where can we escape to? Sooner or later, we will still fall into his hands. What's the hurry? Before coming, I have already sent a message to Ancestor Yun. He will definitely come back to save us. Now, let's go to the back mountain of the Imperial Palace. There is a false god guarding the back mountain. I don't believe that he will dare to chase us in. As long as Ancestor Yun and Emperor Hong return, it will be his doomsday." Chapter 1391. Back Mountain of the Imperial Palace. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. The purple-robed youth and the others did not use voice transmission, so he heard every word. There was indeed a pseudo-god guarding the back mountain. However, these self-sealed pseudo-gods needed a large amount of blood to be awakened. Before they were awakened, they were like Zhuge Xingfeng, not a threat at all. Even if there was a battle beside them, they would not know. So, there was nothing to worry about. Qin Feiyang walked step by step in the void, his blood-red hair fluttering and his murderous aura soaring to the sky. He was a living god of death. Everywhere he went, there were cries of pain. Those who were shrouded by the murderous aura had their blood spurting out uncontrollably from their pores. This was the power of the kill formula when used to the extreme. Even if there were no wounds on their bodies, Qin Feiyang could still snatch the blood in their bodies. However, Qin Feiyang did not kill these people, only snatching half of their blood. Finally, the purple-robed youth and the others entered the sky above the back mountain. Boom! At this moment, Qin Feiyang's cultivation suddenly soared to the peak of the 9-star Combat Emperor realm. However, it was still Qin Feiyang's main body that was controlling the corporeal body. Because the increase from a 4-star Combat Emperor to a 9-star Combat Emperor was only 5 small realms, it was still within his range of tolerance, so there was no need for the inner demons to appear. What? Sensing the terrifying aura, the purple-robed youth and the others' faces changed. What was going on with this person's cultivation? From a 4-star Combat Emperor to a peak 9-star Combat Emperor, how did he do such a heaven-defying thing? A red-robed girl stammered, "Brother Feng, he won't raise his cultivation to the pseudo-god realm later, right?" Hearing the red-robed girl's words, the group of people's hearts sank. The purple-robed youth's mood instantly became incomparably heavy. At this rate, it might really be possible. But they did not know that they were completely scaring themselves. Once, Qin Feiyang had specially tried. Although the kill formula was heaven-defying, it could not superimpose his cultivation to the pseudo-god realm. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang also entered the back mountain of the Imperial Palace openly. None of the Kirin army, who were guarding the back of the mountain, dared to block the way. They all retreated to the side in fear. A young man in black turned his head and glanced at Qin Feiyang. His pupils suddenly shrank, and he said in surprise, "Brother Feng, didn't you say that he didn't dare to come in? Faster! This is already my maximum speed. How can I be faster?" The purple-clad young man glared angrily at the black-clad young man and said, "Don't panic. Although his cultivation level has reached the peak, his speed is only on par with mine. He's dreaming if he wants to catch up with us." Hearing this, Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Just as the purple-clothed young man spoke, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and he instantly disappeared. Where is he? After listening to the purple-clothed young man, the black-clothed young man turned around to look at Qin Feiyang. But when he saw that there was no one behind him, his face was full of surprise. The purple-clothed young man and the others also turned their heads, their eyes full of surprise. Could it be that he knows that he can't catch up with us, so he took the initiative to leave? The group of people involuntarily stopped and turned around to look at the void and the earth in front of them. Let's go! All of a sudden, the woman in red seemed to have thought of something and shouted at the purple-clothed young man. The purple-clothed young man was stunned and seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly led the group of people and fled into the back of the mountain. What's going on? Someone looked at the woman in red and asked in confusion. Qin Feiyang must have gone to the castle. He wants to use the castle to make us relax our vigilance and think that he has left. In fact, he is secretly driving the castle to chase us. The woman in red lowered her voice and said in a low voice, Is that so? Everyone looked at each other. The purple-clothed young man said gloomily, It must be so. This man is cunning. If we are not careful, we will fall into his trap. You are quite smart. Before the purple-clothed young man's voice died away, a playful laughter suddenly sounded in the void in front of the group of people. The next moment, Qin Feiyang appeared out of thin air in front of the group of people. That's right. He entered the castle to mislead these people into thinking that he had left. He had tried this method before. And every time, it was a tried and tested success. Damn it! The purple-clothed young man cursed in his heart. Without another word, he hurriedly led the group of people and fled in the direction of the entrance. Running away without fighting? Are you worthy of being the prodigies of the war god temple? Qin Feiyang had a mocking look in his eyes as he followed behind the group of people unhurriedly. The group of people remained silent, but their hands were unconsciously clenched tightly. Their eyes were also shining with a shocking cold light. Qin Feiyang's words hit their weak spot. As the prodigies of the war god temple, running away was a naked humiliation. However, facing Qin Feiyang at this moment, they really did not have the slightest bit of courage to fight. This was because Qin Feiyang's current murderous aura was too terrifying. It had already made them lose the will to fight. In short, before the battle even started, they were already scared out of their wits. Looks like I have to force you guys to fight. Qin Feiyang chuckled and raised his hand in the air. Boom! An invisible force surged out and pounced on the group of people in an overwhelming manner. The first move of the Ruins of End technique, landslide. The divine aura surged, and the mountains and rivers below instantly collapsed. Countless ferocious beasts fled in fear. The purple-clothed young man's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He shouted, For the sake of the Xueqi family's reputation, I'll stay and fight with him. You guys go. Brother Feng, don't be rash. The red-clothed woman was shocked and hurriedly advised. He's too close to us now. We have no choice. Someone has to stand out and fight him head-on. Don't worry. I'm the strongest person of the War God Temple. It won't be that easy for him to kill me. With that, the purple-clothed young man threw Xueqi Mingyang in front of the red-clothed woman and turned to face Qin Feiyang. Let's go. The woman in red shouted in a low voice. Then, she carried the unconscious Xueqi Mingyang and fled towards the entrance without looking back. The other 9-star combat emperors also took the others and fled madly. Come on. Let me see how strong you, Qin Feiyang, are. Boom. The purple-clothed young man's body shook and a monstrous emperor's aura erupted. He then waved his hands and a crescent moon appeared in the sky and collided with the invisible force. The collision of the two divine arts instantly caused a deafening explosion. A destructive shockwave spread wildly in all directions with the two of them as the center. Roar. Crack. Rumble. The mountains and rivers shattered and the ferocious beasts howled. In the blink of an eye, everything within a few hundred miles was razed to the ground. Although the red-clothed woman and the others had escaped in time, they were still blown away by the airwave. Their bodies were badly mutilated. If it weren't for the protection of the 9-star combat emperors, the 2-star and 8-star combat emperors would have died on the spot. Qin Feiyang glanced at the red-clothed woman and the others and ignored them. He looked at the purple-clothed young man and said with a smile, The #1 person of the War God Temple. You are indeed Xueqi Xingfeng. I never would have thought that the famous Qin Feiyang would know of me, Zhuge Xingfeng. Should I feel honored? Zhuge Xingfeng said. Not honored. You should feel lucky. If you had overestimated yourself like Zhuge Jinghong, you would have been a corpse by now. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Zhuge Jinghong was killed by you. Killing intent surged in Zhuge Xingfeng's eyes. How dare you insult my mother? I, Qin Feiyang, will not let go of your ancestor, Zhuge Shenyun, let alone Zhuge Jinghong. Qin Feiyang took a step forward. A terrifying aura shook the void as he threw out a punch. Arrogant! Zhuge Xingfeng shouted. His battle chi surged as he threw out a palm strike. Boom! The moment the fist and palm collided, Zhuge Xingfeng's arm was torn open. He was sent flying with blood spurting out. This strength. How is this possible? His eyes were blank. They were both at the peak of the 9-star combat emperor realm. Why was Qin Feiyang so much stronger than him? You don't know about this, do you? Once upon a time, I killed a divine beast and ate its flesh. Therefore, my physique has been greatly improved. Now, both my strength and the strength of my physique are far superior to those of the same cultivation level. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and threw out another punch. Killed a divine beast. Zhuge Xingfeng murmured. His face was filled with disbelief. He even forgot to counterattack. Boom! Qin Feiyang's punch landed on Zhuge Xingfeng's chest. Crack! His ribs broke on the spot and his chest caved in. Zhuge Xingfeng let out a painful cry as he crashed into the ground like a meteorite. Boom! A deep crater with a diameter of several kilometers immediately appeared. He actually killed a divine beast. How did he do it? Zhuge Xingfeng lay at the bottom of the deep pit, his eyes filled with disbelief. Suddenly, he slammed his palm on the ground and shot up into the sky like a cannonball. His body was covered in blood and his long hair danced in the wind. At this moment, he was like an awakened beast, giving off a great sense of crisis. So what if he killed a divine beast? I, Zhuge Xingfeng, defeated countless geniuses of the War God Temple and reached the top of the wind cloud list. My reputation is not undeserved. Beast transformation, blood dragon. As Zhuge Xingfeng roared, his whole body began to change. His body swelled crazily and his clothes were torn into pieces. Finally, they flew all over the sky. At the same time, a fierce aura rushed out from his body. Qin Feiyang was surprised. Ah! As his body swelled bigger and bigger, Zhuge Xingfeng could not help but howl as if he was suffering unparalleled pain. Suddenly, a dazzling blood-red light appeared on his body. As soon as the blood-red light appeared, his skin began to change. Dragon scales the size of a palm started to appear all over his body. The dragon scales appeared as if they were dyed in blood, and they were completely blood-red. Finally, his whole body was covered in dragon scales. Moreover, his limbs and head were also changing. His limbs turned into dragon claws and his head into a dragon's head. The nails on his limbs grew to 1/2 meter long and were like sharp blades with a bone-piercing sharpness. At this time, Zhuge Xingfeng's body was more than 10 meters tall. The dragon scales all over his body were shining with blood-red light. He had turned into a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus. And there was no trace of human emotion on his body. There was only killing, hostility, and blood. Qin Feiyang, today is the day you die.